General Jonathan Reeves grabbed the rifle out of her hands. "Who the hell authorized this?" The entire weapons bay froze. 20 soldiers stopped breathing. Maya Carter didn't step back. She didn't blink. She looked at the 4-star general gripping her Barrett M82 and said quietly without flinching, "I authorized myself, sir." Someone dropped a pen. Nobody picked it up. Reeves stared at the badge on her uniform. A small black badge, 3 numbers, 1 decimal point, 200 meters confirmed. His hands loosened on the rifle. If you've never heard of that number, stay until the end of this story. Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And if you're new here, hit subscribe because this one will stay with you. The morning started like every other morning at Black Ridge Military Facility. Cold air off the mountains, the smell of gun oil and black coffee, boots hitting concrete in the pre-dawn dark. Soldiers moving through their assignments with the mechanical precision of people who had learned long ago that the military didn't wait for anyone to feel ready. General Jonathan Reeves arrived at 0545, which was late by his standards. He had flown in the night before from the Pentagon, and the 7-hour flight had done nothing good for his back or his mood. He was 58 years old, 2 years from mandatory retirement, and he had spent nearly every one of those years believing that he understood soldiers, who they were, what they were capable of, what their limitations looked like before they even knew those limitations existed. That was his gift, he believed. Reading people, cutting through the performance and the polish and seeing the actual soldier underneath. He had been right enough times that he never seriously questioned the gift. Lieutenant Daniel Brooks met him at the entrance to the main facility, saluting, crisply handing him a briefing folder, launching immediately into the day's schedule. Brooks was efficient young and relentlessly positive about everything, which Reeves found both useful and slightly exhausting. "Testing schedule begins at 700, sir. We have the long-range qualification block, then the special equipment review, then the afternoon debrief with Colonel Ward's unit." "Ward's here." Brooks paused mid-sentence. "Yes, sir. Arrived yesterday. His unit's been running ops out of Black Ridge for the past 3 weeks." Reeves filed that away without comment. Ethan Ward was one of the few people in the entire military whose presence always meant something larger was happening beneath the surface. He had the kind of career that didn't fit cleanly into official records, which meant the records that did exist were the small visible tip of something much deeper. "Fine," Reeves said. "Let's start with the testing." The weapons evaluation bay at Black Ridge was a serious facility. Not a showroom, not a demonstration space. A working range designed for exactly the kind of extreme condition testing that couldn't happen at standard installations. The mountain terrain beyond the facility's boundary extended for kilometers, and the elevation changes created wind patterns and atmospheric conditions that mimicked some of the most operationally demanding environments on Earth. Reeves walked in expecting to find the usual lineup. Senior NCOs, established operators, the kind of soldiers whose names he might already know or whose reputations had preceded them through official channels. Instead, the first thing he registered was a woman standing alone at the far end of the bay. Not standing exactly, settled. Her body had dropped into the kind of stillness that most soldiers spend years trying to learn and never quite achieve. She was positioned behind a Barrett M82, a .50 caliber semi-automatic rifle that weighed nearly 30 pounds and generated enough recoil to shatter the shoulder of someone who didn't know exactly what they were doing. And she was doing something that stopped Reeves in his tracks before he fully processed why. She wasn't looking through the scope. She was looking past the scope, past the range, past the near distance and the middle distance. She was looking at something that existed only in her own calculation, and the complete absence of tension in her posture told him she was not nervous, not performing, not preparing herself emotionally for anything. She already knew what she was going to do. Reeves took 3 steps toward her and then stopped, because he noticed the rifle. A Barrett M82, full configuration, long-range bipod, the magazine seated and ready. He turned to the range master, a barrel-chested staff sergeant named Holloway, who had run this bay for 6 years, and who Reeves knew by reputation. Who authorized her on that weapon? Holloway's expression did something complicated. Sir, she... Who authorized her? Before Holloway could answer, the woman spoke. She hadn't turned around. She hadn't moved from her position. Her eyes were still fixed on that invisible point in the middle distance. But her voice came out clear and precise, with no apology in it, no hedge, no social softening. I authorized myself, sir. Reeves crossed the distance between them in 4 strides. He grabbed the rifle by the barrel carefully because he was not a reckless man, but firmly, and lifted it away from her position. The entire bay stopped. Every soldier who had been moving checking equipment running through qualifications froze. The silence was the kind that has weight to it, the kind that presses against your ears. The woman turned and looked at him. She was young, late 20s maybe. Sergeant stripes. A face that was entirely composed, not blank, not rebellious, not challenging, composed. Like someone who had already calculated where this conversation was going and had decided on her response 3 exchanges before it happened. Sergeant, Reeves said, and his voice had the particular quality that 34 years of command authority produce a voice that does not need to be loud to be absolute. Do you want to explain to me what you think you're doing? Long-range qualification, sir, scheduled for 0700. The Barrett is not on the standard qualification list for your rank. No, sir, it's not. Then why is it in your hands? She reached into the breast pocket of her uniform, produced a folded document and held it out to him. He took it, unfolded it, scanned it once, then more slowly. It was an authorization, signed, valid, with a clearance indicator at the top right corner that made Reeves look up sharply because that clearance indicator was not something he saw on standard issue paperwork. Where did you get this? It was issued to me, sir. By whom? I'm not authorized to say, sir. Reeves stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at her uniform again, looking for the thing that had snagged at the edge of his awareness when he first walked in. He found it. The badge. Small. Black. Positioned on her left side below the unit designation above the service ribbons. At first glance, it looked like a qualification badge, the kind of administrative recognition marker that got issued for range scores and proficiency certifications. Unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. But Reeves knew what he was looking at. The badge was completely black, no unit designation, no official military seal. And at its center, in small silver text, 200 meters. Confirmed. The noise in Reeves's chest was not something he would ever describe to anyone. It was the feeling of a man who believed he had seen everything, encountering evidence that he had not seen everything. It was the feeling of 34 years of professional certainty taking one very hard step backward. He handed the rifle back to her. He said nothing. She took the rifle without comment, without triumph, without any visible reaction at all. She simply returned to her position, settled back into that deep, motionless stillness, and looked past the scope at whatever she had been calculating before he interrupted her. Reeves turned to Lieutenant Brooks, who had been standing 2 steps behind him throughout this entire exchange, professionally expressionless, but very obviously paying extremely close attention. Pull her file, Reeves said. Everything. Yes, sir. Now. Sir. I said now, Lieutenant. Rag. Daniel Brooks was good at his job. This was not a small thing. Being good at an administrative role in the military required a specific combination of organizational intelligence, institutional knowledge, and the ability to navigate bureaucratic structures that were simultaneously rigid and labyrinthine. Brooks had all of these qualities and had developed them to a high level over 8 years of service. He pulled Maya Carter's file in 11 minutes. Then he stood in the general's temporary office with the file in his hands and a look on his face that Reeves had not seen on a lieutenant's face in a long time. Well, Reeves said. Sir, there's not a lot here. What do you mean, not a lot? I mean... Brooks set the file on the desk and opened it. The first 3 pages were standard administrative information. Name, date of birth, branch, Current assignment. Service history summary. The kind of basic biographical skeleton that every soldier's file contained. After page 3, the file went quiet. Not empty. Quiet. The pages were there, but the content had been replaced by the uniform gray of restricted information blocks. Section after section, entire chapters of her military career covered by the same 6 words: classified. Access requires Tier 4 clearance. Training history, Reeves said. Classified, sir. Deployment record. Classified. Mission reports. Classified. Marksmanship qualifications. Brooks paused. That one's interesting, sir. There's a partial record standard pistol and rifle qualifications from early in her service, maybe the first year, and then it just stops. Stops. Like someone removed it, or reclassified it. The records jump from her second year of service directly to her current assignment. Reeves sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. How old is she? Brooks checked the first page. 27, sir. 27 years old. A sergeant's rank. A classified file that senior officers couldn't access. And a badge that represented something Reeves had spent 3 decades believing was at the absolute outer boundary of documented human capability. He thought about the moment she had looked at him after he took the rifle. The complete absence of defensiveness. The absence of performance. The absence of the things soldiers typically displayed when a 4-star general walked up and challenged them: the careful deference, the controlled anxiety, the strategic awareness of what was at stake. She had looked at him the way a person looks at something minor. An administrative inconvenience. A small interruption in the middle of work they were going to do anyway. Get me Colonel Ward, Reeves said. Ethan Ward arrived in the general's office 12 minutes later, which told Reeves that Ward had been expecting the call. Ward was 45, rangy and economical in his movements, with the kind of facial control that came from years of operational work in environments where an unguarded expression could cost you something important. He commanded a special operations unit whose specific function Reeves knew existed, but whose specific activities remained largely outside his direct awareness, which was itself an unusual situation for a general. Sergeant Carter, Reeves said. No preamble, no setup. Ward's expression didn't move. What about her? Her file. What about it? You know what's in it. Some of it, Ward said. He sat down without being invited, which was a thing he did, and which Reeves had learned to not bother objecting to. I know what I'm cleared to know. Then tell me what you're cleared to know. Ward was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that is not reluctance, but assessment. The mental calculation of how much information to release, in what order to produce the specific understanding he wanted to produce. Maya Carter enlisted at 19, Ward said. Standard entry, standard training. Within the first month, 2 different trainers flagged her for separate evaluations, not because she was struggling, because she wasn't. Because she was doing things that didn't match her experience level, small things at first. Range scores that shouldn't have been possible for someone 2 weeks out of basic. Observation assessments where she was identifying details that the instructors missed. Ward paused. Environmental reads. Wind. Distance estimation. She had an intuitive processing of spatial relationships that was... He stopped. The word one of her evaluators used was aberrant, and he meant it as a compliment. Reeves said nothing, letting him continue. She was redirected, Ward said. Quietly. New training track, smaller group, different instructors with different clearances. The transition was handled carefully, so it didn't look like a transition. As far as most of the people around her knew, she was just a soldier moving through normal progression. And her marksmanship. Ward's expression moved slightly. Not a smile. Ward's face didn't really do smiles, but something adjacent to respect. She qualified at 600 meters before most operators qualify at 300. By the end of her first year of specialized training, she was consistent at 1,400. By the end of her second year... How consistent? Reeves interrupted. First round hit, consistent, not average score. First round every time. The room was quiet for a moment. The 200-meter record, Reeves said. Ward looked at him directly. That's classified at a level above what I'm going to discuss in this room, sir. I outrank you by a considerable margin, Colonel. Yes, sir. And the classification on that record outranks both of us by a considerable margin. Ward's voice was completely level, not disrespectful, simply accurate. What I can tell you is that the number is real. The badge is legitimate. The circumstances under which it was achieved are documented in channels that you could access if you applied for the appropriate clearance, and if you did access them, you would understand why the circumstances are classified. Was anyone else there? Ward was silent long enough that it was itself an answer. She wasn't supposed to be there, was she? Reeves said. She wasn't supposed to be in the position that required that shot. I can't confirm or deny operational details, sir. But she was 20 when it happened. Ward said nothing. 20 years old. Reeves repeated almost to himself. He looked out the window for a moment. Outside, the mountain range stretched toward the horizon, cold and distant and enormous. Who knows outside of whatever operational circle was involved? Very few people, Ward said. That was intentional. The people who should know, know. The people who don't need to know, don't know. Reeves finished the sentence. He turned back from the window. Including everyone on this base. Including most of them, yes, sir. Which is why she's operating here under a sergeant's rank with a file that nobody can read. The rank is her choice, Ward said, and something in his voice shifted when he said it. Something that was not quite admiration, but was close to it, the recognition of something unusual. She's been offered advancement multiple times. She's declined each time. Requested reassignment to standard operational duties. She doesn't want the oversight that comes with higher rank in her specific situation. She wants to do the work. Reeves absorbed that. He thought about the moment again, her voice quiet and exact, saying, I authorized myself, sir, not as defiance, not as arrogance, but as simple factual statement. She had authorized herself because the authorization existed, and she was the person to whom it applied, and therefore the logic of the situation was uncomplicated. And he had grabbed the rifle out of her hands. He had walked into a situation he didn't understand and responded with the authority of someone who understood it completely. I want to see it, Reeves said. The distance, a demonstration. Ward looked at him carefully. Sir. Not classified. Not the operational record. A current demonstration. Here on this range. Whatever distance she can confirm with available equipment. That's your call to make, sir? Set it up, Reeves said. Tomorrow morning. Extended range. Ward stood, buttoned his jacket, and moved toward the door. Then he stopped, turned back. Sir, one thing before tomorrow. What? She's going to ask what the target is, the range, the conditions, the specific parameters. She's going to need to assess the environment for at least an hour before the shot. Ward's voice was completely neutral, but the content of what he was saying was not neutral at all. She's not going to want an audience. She's going to get one, Reeves said. Ward nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I understand. He paused at the door. I just thought you should know she's not performing for anyone. If she does this, she's not doing it for you. She's doing it because the work is the work. He left. Reeves sat alone in the office for a long moment. He picked up the file from his desk, opened it to page 1, looked at the administrative photograph, the standard issue military photo, face-forward expression, neutral, the mandatory blankness of official documentation. Maya Carter looked back at him from the photograph with the same composed, unbothered expression she had turned on him in the bay that morning. He thought about the badge. 200 meters. Confirmed. For context that Reeves had been carrying in his professional knowledge for 3 decades, the longest confirmed sniper shot in documented history. At the time he entered the military, was barely over 2,000 meters, and that achievement had involved multiple spotters, advanced ballistic calculation equipment, and conditions that aligned in a way that most operators acknowledged would never align again. 3,200 meters was not merely longer. It was in a different conversation entirely. It was a number that if it had appeared in a novel, he would have dismissed as authorial ignorance of what rifles actually did over distance. And she had done it at 20 years old. And she had never told anyone about it who didn't already know. He closed the file. He sat with that for a long time. Maya Carter was in the maintenance bay at 1630 when Lieutenant Brooks found her. She was field stripping the Barrett M82, working through the disassembly with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this specific task so many times that it had become a form of meditation. Each component came apart in sequence, was inspected, set aside, inspected again. Her hands moved with a certainty that was almost unsettling to watch, not mechanical, not robotic, but the specific certainty of someone who understood every single thing they were touching. Brooks cleared his throat. She didn't look up. "Lieutenant? Sergeant Carter, General Reeves has requested a demonstration tomorrow morning. Extended range. He wants you available at 0600 for environmental assessment." Her hands paused for exactly 1 second, then continued. "What parameters? Maximum available range on the Black Ridge extended course. Staff Sergeant Holloway estimates approximately 300 meters to the farthest target position. Wind data for tomorrow morning." Brooks blinked. "I don't have that, Sergeant. I'll need the atmospheric forecast for 0400 through 0800. Temperature differential, upper-level wind pattern, any precipitation probability." She set down the barrel assembly and looked up at him for the first time. "And I need the specific target specifications. Size, material, mounting height. I'll get all of that to you." "Thank you, Lieutenant." Brooks started to leave, stopped, turned back. "Can I ask you something, Sergeant, off the record?" She considered him for a moment. "You can ask. Why are you still a sergeant?" The question was direct and slightly presumptuous for a lieutenant addressing an NCO, and they both knew it. But there was no hostility in it, genuine bafflement, the sincere question of someone who had spent the past several hours looking at her file and coming away with more confusion than he arrived with. Maya picked up the barrel assembly and began the inspection process. She said nothing for long enough that Brooks assumed she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, "Because a sergeant can show up at 0530, do the work and go home. A colonel has to attend the meetings about the meetings." Brooks stood there for a moment. Then he said, "Fair enough, Sergeant," and left. Maya returned to the Barrett. The components came apart, were inspected, were set aside. She was already thinking about tomorrow morning. Not about the general. Not about the audience. Not about what they expected or hoped for or believed was possible. She was thinking about the mountain, the distance, the temperature differential that would build as the sun came up over the ridge, the way the valley wind would move through the terrain between 0630 and 0700 when the morning thermal current shifted. She was thinking about the problem. The problem was the only thing that had ever been interesting to her. Everything else was just weather. Donk. That evening in the facility's junior officer lounge, Sergeant First Class Marco DeSalvo was holding court. DeSalvo was a 10-year infantry veteran with a legitimate combat record and a very high opinion of himself that, to be fair to DeSalvo, was not entirely unjustified. He was good. He knew he was good. He operated in an environment that regularly confirmed he was good, and this had the predictable effect on his personality that such environments tend to have. He had been watching the morning's events in the weapons bay with keen professional attention. 3,000 meters, DeSalvo said. On a Barrett. Come on. Corporal Jason Hewitt, seated across from him, was 6 months out of training and trying very hard to look like he wasn't intimidated by DeSalvo. She's got a badge, Hewitt said, with the number on it. Anyone can get a badge printed, DeSalvo said. Anyone can put numbers on it. 200 meters is physically impossible under field conditions. The bullet trajectory alone. He shook his head. You know what happens to a .50 caliber round at 3,200 meters. Gravity wind drift, Coriolis effect. You're talking about a bullet that's been in the air for over 5 seconds. Even if your calculation is perfect, you need conditions that don't exist outside a wind tunnel. She asked for the atmospheric data, said specialist Reena Patel, who was younger than Hewitt but considerably sharper. She was cleaning her sidearm with the same attention Maya had given the Barrett, and she had been listening to DeSalvo for the past 20 minutes with the expression of someone doing arithmetic. That's what Holloway said. She asked for the 0400 atmospheric data, temperature differential upper wind pattern. Good for her, DeSalvo said. That's not a random question, Patel said. That's someone calculating a correction before they've seen the conditions. That's not a shooter who got lucky once. That's someone who does this from the math out. DeSalvo looked at her. You're 23 years old, specialist. 22, Patel said. And I'm not the one who's going to be standing there watching her hit a 100-meter target tomorrow morning and looking for somewhere to be afterward. The lounge went quiet. DeSalvo set down his coffee. His jaw was working slightly, the specific movement of a man processing something he didn't like. She won't hit it, he said. Okay, said Patel, returning to her sidearm. She won't hit it, he said again to the room. Nobody answered. At 4:15, Maya Carter was awake. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't running through scenarios or visualizing outcomes or performing any of the preparatory rituals that athletes and performers describe in interviews as their pre-competition routine. She was reading the atmospheric data that Brooks had delivered at 2300 the night before. She read it twice slowly. Then she made 2 small calculations on a notepad. Not long calculations, not elaborate, and set the notepad aside. Lay down. Slept for 90 minutes. At 05:45, she was in the weapons bay. At 05:57, General Reeves walked in. He had brought people. 6 officers, 2 technical advisors, a range safety officer, and Holloway. He had also brought DeSalvo, which was either a deliberate decision or a coincidence, and Reeves had the self-awareness to acknowledge he wasn't entirely sure which. Maya was standing at the firing position. She was not looking at the range. She was looking at the mountains, watching something move. The upper vegetation on the ridgeline, the trees that caught the first thermal current as the valley temperature began its morning shift. She watched the movement of those trees for 45 seconds with the same quality of attention that she had given the distant nothing the previous morning. Then she turned and said to Holloway, "Target at the 3100 position, standard 8-inch steel plate." Holloway looked at Reeves. Reeves nodded. "Can I have your calculations?" One of the technical advisors asked her. He had a tablet with ballistic software. "We can run them through." "I've run them," Maya said. "If you'd like a second verification." "I don't," she said. Not rudely, simply accurately. She checked the Barrett. Magazine seated. Safety. Bipod position. She made one small adjustment to the bipod, not to the scope, not to the elevation turret, but to the physical angle of the bipod's left leg, tilting it by what looked like less than 2 degrees. "That's a ground compensation," Patel said very quietly to no one in particular. "What?" Hewitt said. "The ground is not level. She's compensating in the physical position rather than the scope, because at extreme distance, a scope adjustment at this range introduces its own variability. She's taking the variability out of the equipment and into the position." Patel paused. "That's not something you do if you don't know what you're doing." DeSalvo said nothing. Maya settled behind the rifle. That stillness came over her again, the deep inhabited stillness of a person who was not waiting, but arriving. She lowered her eye to the scope, and then in the same movement she had made the morning before, she looked past the scope. Not through it, past it, at the full visible length of the mountain terrain. General Reeves raised his binoculars. The steel plate at 3,100 meters was barely visible even through the optics. A small gray square against the mountain face. At the naked eye, it was nothing, a suggestion of geometry in the distance. Nobody spoke. The morning was very cold. The thermal current that Maya had been watching in the ridgeline trees had shifted in the past 12 minutes, moving from a northwest pattern to a more northerly one, as the sun cleared the eastern peaks. She had factored this. The calculation had changed twice in the past 20 minutes, once at 06:03, when the temperature differential hit its morning inflection point, once at 06:19, when the upper-level wind showed a backing tendency. She had refactored without writing it down, because the numbers were not on paper. The numbers were in her. She took one breath, let half of it out. She fired. The sound of a .50 caliber rifle is not a sound that people who have never heard it describe correctly. It is not a bang. It is a pressure event, a wave of compressed air that hits the chest and the eardrum simultaneously. A sound that is felt before it is heard, that the body responds to before the brain processes it. Everyone at the range absorbed that pressure. Then they waited. At 300 meters, the travel time of a .50 caliber round under standard conditions is approximately 4.2 seconds. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, 4. Clang. Clear and metallic and distant and absolutely completely unambiguous. Nobody moved. Holloway lowered his spotting scope and looked at General Reeves. His face was doing something complicated. "First round hit, sir," he said. His voice was completely flat, the flatness of a man making absolutely certain that his voice carried no interpretation, no editorializing, only fact. "Steel plate, 8-inch, 300 meters. First round." Reeves lowered his binoculars. He looked at Maya Carter. She was already breaking the rifle down, not looking at the range, not watching for confirmation, not receiving the reaction of the people around her with any visible acknowledgement. The work was done. She was moving to the next phase of the work, which was proper breakdown and cleaning. DeSalvo was looking at the floor. Patel was looking at Maya with an expression that was entirely undisguised. General Reeves stood with his binoculars at his side and felt something that he had not felt in a very long time. Not admiration exactly, not surprise exactly. The specific discomfort of a man who had made a judgment and been shown with clarity and without drama that the judgment was wrong. He had walked into the weapons bay the previous morning and seen a young woman behind a rifle that he believed she had no business holding. He had made that assessment in less than 4 seconds. He had acted on it in less time than that. And the thing that sat in his chest now, watching her field strip the Barrett with the same methodical precision with which she had just put a round through a target at over 3 kilometers, was not simply the professional reckoning of being wrong about a soldier's capability. It was something older than that. Something that had nothing to do with rifles or range distances. He had looked at her and seen a category before he had seen a person. He said nothing. He handed his binoculars to Brooks. He turned and walked toward the range exit. Behind him he heard Patel say very quietly to no one in particular, "First round." And then from somewhere near the back of the group, in a voice that was much quieter than usual, he heard DeSalvo say, "Yeah, just that. Yeah." Reeves didn't sleep that night. He lay on the narrow bed in his quarters at Black Ridge and stared at the ceiling and listened to the facility settle around him, the distant hum of the generator, the occasional footstep in the corridor outside, the sound of wind moving through the mountain terrain beyond the walls. He had slept in worse places. He had slept in conditions that made this room feel like a hotel. But his mind would not quiet, and the reason his mind would not quiet had a name and a rank and a badge with 3 numbers on it. He kept returning to the sound. Not the shot itself. The confirmation sound. That clean metallic clang from 300 meters away, arriving 4 seconds after the report of the rifle, and the way everyone at the range had absorbed it in complete silence. Like a sound that required a moment to become real. Like a sound that the brain needed to process through a second layer of cognition before it could accept what the ears had already received. He kept returning to her hands, the way she had broken the rifle down without looking up, without acknowledging the silence around her, without any visible awareness of what she had just done to the understanding of 20 soldiers who had watched it happen. At 300, he stopped trying to sleep. He dressed, poured cold coffee from the carafe on his desk, and sat down with her file again. Not the classified sections, those were still inaccessible, but the visible portions. The thin biographical skeleton that remained after everything restricted had been removed. Name, Date of birth. Enlistment date. Early training record, 2 years of normal progression. The kind of record that thousands of soldiers produced, nothing exceptional on its visible surface. And then the gap. The clean erasure, where her history should have continued, and instead produced only those gray restricted blocks. He turned to the first page again, looked at the photograph. He had been doing that, returning to the photograph without fully understanding why. The photograph told him nothing new. It was a standard military ID image, expressionless by requirement, technically adequate, visually unremarkable. But he kept looking at it with the persistent feeling that he was trying to read something that was written in a language he almost spoke. He set the file down, picked up his phone, sent a message to his office at the Pentagon. Full clearance request. Subject Carter M. Sargent. Blackridge. Priority. He knew the response would take at least 48 hours. He also knew with the professional certainty of a man who had spent 34 years navigating institutional bureaucracy that the response was going to come back with restrictions he couldn't override. He sent it anyway. Then he sat with the cold coffee and waited for morning. At 6:15, Maya Carter was in the facility's physical training area. Not running, not lifting. She was doing something that Specialist Patel, who had come in early and stopped in the doorway without announcing herself, had never seen anyone do in a military gym before. Maya was standing absolutely still in the center of the floor, eyes open, and she was tracking the movement of the ventilation current through the room. Not watching it, tracking it. Following the subtle temperature differentials between the floor-level air and the ceiling-level air, reading the patterns of circulation the way a sailor reads water. Patel stood in the doorway for 90 seconds before she said anything. "Sergeant Carter." Maya's eyes moved to her. "Specialist. Can I ask what you're doing?" "Calibrating?" Maya said. Patel processed that. "Calibrating what?" "My read on the room." Maya turned slightly to face her more directly. Every enclosed space has a circulation pattern that's consistent with its specific geometry. If you understand the pattern, you can identify when it's disrupted. By a person. By a door opening. By a weight shift in the floor. She paused. "It's useful." Patel looked at her for a moment. "That's not something they teach in any training course I've ever been through." "No." Maya agreed. "It isn't." Patel stepped fully into the room. She had been thinking about how to have this conversation since the previous morning, running different approaches, calculating the appropriate tone, trying to find the entry point that was direct without being presumptuous. She was 22 years old, and Maya Carter was 27, and the 5-year difference felt in this specific situation like a much larger distance than mathematics suggested. "What was it like?" Patel asked. "The first time you fired at that distance, the first time you actually had a target at that range, and you knew what you were doing, and you did it." Maya was quiet for a moment. "It wasn't a range exercise," she said finally. Patel went still. "I know." "Then you understand why I'm not going to tell you what it was like." "I understand why you can't tell me the specifics," Patel said carefully. "I was asking about you personally. What it felt like, not what happened." Maya looked at her with the same quality of assessment she directed at everything precise, unhurried, not unkind. "Cold," she said finally. "It felt cold. Not temperature, just the inside of a decision that has real consequences. When something is a range exercise, the only thing at stake is your score. When something is real..." She stopped. "The math is the same. The position is the same. The fundamentals don't change, but the weight of it is completely different. Does it get easier to carry that weight?" Maya considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. "It gets clearer," she said. "You understand it better. You stop fighting the weight and start working with it." She paused. "Easier is the wrong word." Patel nodded slowly. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said the thing she had actually come to say. "The general is looking for you." Maya's expression didn't change. "I know. He wants to talk." "I know that too." Are you going to make him come find you? Something moved in Maya's expression. Then not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. The faintest suggestion of amusement at the question, and its implicit understanding of the dynamic it described. No, she said. I'm going to finish what I'm doing and then I'll go find him. Patel looked at her for another moment. Then she nodded, turned, and left. Maya turned back to the ventilation current. She stood there for 7 more minutes. She found him in the facility's observation level, a glassed-in walkway above the main operational floor that gave a clear view of the ranges below. He was standing with his hands behind his back, looking down at the extended range at the 3 100-meter target position that was now barely visible in the morning light. She knocked on the door frame. He turned. "Sergeant?" He gestured toward the far end of the walkway. "Walk with me." She fell in beside him. For the first 100 feet, neither of them said anything. The only sound was their boots on the walkway surface and the muted operational noise from the floor below. Reeves spoke first. "I've submitted a clearance request for your full file." "I know, sir." He glanced at her. "You know." "I was informed this morning." "By whom?" "I'm not authorized to say, sir." He absorbed that. "Of course you're not." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Who is running your operational oversight, Sergeant? Who are you actually reporting to?" Maya looked at him steadily. "I'm assigned to Black Ridge Facility under Colonel Ward's operational umbrella. My day-to-day function is weapons development consultation and long-range assessment support." "That's not what I asked." "I know, sir." "Who do you report to?" She met his eyes, held them. "With respect, General, the answer to that question is above my pay grade to share." The silence that followed was the particular silence of 2 people in a power structure encountering one of power's actual limits. Reeves outranked her by a considerable distance. That outranking meant a great many things, and it did not mean he could extract information from her that she was not authorized to provide. He knew that. She knew he knew that. "Fine," he said, and resumed walking. "Tell me what you can tell me." "What do you want to know, sir?" "Why you're here, at Black Ridge, specifically." "There's a weapons development evaluation in progress. A new long-range precision system that requires assessment under real environmental conditions. I'm part of the assessment team." "What system?" "Classified, sir." He exhaled slowly through his nose. "Is there anything about your situation that isn't classified?" "I'm a sergeant," she said. "That's on the record." Something in his expression shifted a very small change, the micro movement of a man who had just registered something unexpected in a conversational exchange. "You made a joke." "I make jokes sometimes, sir." He looked at her for a moment. The evaluation in his expression was different now than it had been the previous morning. Less certainty, more questions. "You deliberately let me walk in yesterday morning," he said. "You knew who I was before I crossed the floor. You heard my voice, or you were told I was coming, or you simply recognized the sound of a general arriving in a facility. And you let me walk all the way up to that rifle before you said anything." Maya said nothing. "Why?" he said. She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't let you do anything, sir. You made your decisions. I made mine." "My decision was to take a weapon out of your hands based on an assumption." "Yes, sir." "And your decision was?" "To let you see what you saw," she said. "And then to let you look at the badge." She paused. Most people stop there. Once they see the badge, they're done asking questions they haven't earned yet. He stared at her. "But I didn't stop." "No, sir, you didn't. Is that good or bad?" "It's interesting," she said. And there it was again, that ghost of something in her expression, not quite a smile, not quite the absence of one, something in between. "You're the first 4-star who's come to the range in 3 years who didn't stop at the badge." Reeves turned that over. "You've had senior officers here before." "Yes, sir." "And they saw the badge and let it go," she said. "Decided they didn't want to know what it meant, or decided they already knew what it meant and that was sufficient." She paused. The badge is designed that way. It tells you enough to stand down without telling you enough to understand. But it didn't make me stand down? No. It made you curious. She looked at him directly. That's unusual, sir. In my experience, rank and curiosity trend in opposite directions after a certain level. He felt that land. Didn't argue with it, because the honest part of him recognized it was accurate. What does it mean, the number? Walk me through the actual physics of what you did. Not the classified context, the shot itself. She was quiet for a moment. A standard confirmed long-range shot is defined by a first-round hit on a human-sized target under field conditions, she said. The current documented record at the time my record was established was just under 2,200 meters. At that distance, you're already dealing with a bullet flight time of over 3 seconds. Wind drift. Coriolis effect, barometric pressure, humidity. All of these introduce variables that compound over distance in ways that no ballistic table can fully account for. Every table is an approximation. Every calculation is a model. The model stops being reliable long before you get to the actual conditions. So what do you use instead of the model? I use the model to get close, she said. And then I read what the model can't read. He waited. Temperature differential between the ground layer and the 10-meter layer of air above it, she said. That differential creates a refractive condition that affects trajectory in the final third of the bullet's flight. Most ballistic software doesn't account for it because it requires a real-time read of conditions at the target location, which in most scenarios you don't have. She paused. I've spent 5 years learning to read that differential from the source position, from the shooter's side. From the way air moves at my location, I can calculate what it's doing at the target. Reeves said nothing. He was listening with his entire attention. At 3,200 meters, the bullet is in the air for approximately 5.4 seconds. She continued. In that time, you're accounting for 100+ variables that are all moving simultaneously. Wind at multiple elevations, the Earth's rotation, the curvature of the bullet's path, the temperature drop over distance, the specific metallurgical behavior of the projectile at reduced velocity in the terminal phase. She stopped. The model gives you a starting point. The rest is... She paused. Feel isn't the right word. It's more like listening. You stop trying to calculate everything and you start reading the system as a system, the whole environment as a single thing. He looked at her for a long moment. And you learned this how? I was taught the fundamentals, she said. The rest I figured out. In 4 years. In 4 years, yes, sir. He shook his head. Slowly, not in disbelief. He was past disbelief. The previous morning had burned that out of him, but in the specific response of a man encountering something that his existing categories couldn't contain. The clearance request, he said. You know it's going to come back restricted. Yes, sir? You know I'm going to push. I'd expect nothing less, sir. And you're not concerned about that. She looked at him. Should I be? He didn't have a good answer to that. Why? The clearance response came back in 31 hours faster than Reeves expected, which itself told him something. Speed of response in bureaucratic systems was never random. Someone had seen the request and had decided deliberately to resolve it quickly rather than let it sit. The response was 3 words. Request respectfully declined. Not a form rejection. A personal response which meant a person with sufficient authority had reviewed the request and made a specific decision about it. Not an automated restriction, but a deliberate one. He stared at it for a long time. Then he forwarded it to his office in Washington with a single line. Find out who signed this. The response to that came back in 4 hours. Unknown. Signature clearance above tracking level. Above tracking level. Which meant whoever had declined his request held an authorization that was not simply classified, but structurally invisible to the tracking systems that documented who was authorized to decline what. There were very few categories of people in the entire defense establishment who operated at that level. Reeves sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. He had been a general for 11 years. In 11 years, he had never had a clearance request declined by someone he couldn't identify. He thought about what Maya had said on the walkway. The badge is designed that way. It tells you enough to stand down without telling you enough to understand. The whole architecture of her situation, he was beginning to understand, was built on exactly that principle. The badge, the restricted file, the clearance decline, the anonymous authorization that overrode a 4-star general's request. Layers of visible but inaccessible information that told you there was something there without telling you what it was. You could see the shape of the secret without seeing the secret itself. He called Ward. Ward came in, sat down uninvited, and looked at the response on Reeves's desk without touching it. "You knew this was going to happen," Reeves said. "I suspected, sir." "Who declined it?" Ward was quiet. "Ethan," Reeves said. He had never called Ward by his first name before. In 34 years with all the senior officers he'd known, he rarely used first names in professional contexts. But he used it now, and Ward registered it, and something in Ward's expression became more careful. "I'm not asking you to violate your clearance. I'm asking you what you know, what you can tell me without breaking whatever oath it is you've taken around this." Ward was silent for a very long moment. "There is an oversight structure around Maya Carter," he said finally, "that is not part of the standard military chain of command. I don't know all of it. I know enough to know that it's there and that it's operated by people who take what they're protecting very seriously." "Protecting her. Protecting the capability," Ward said carefully. "And by extension her." From what Ward looked at him directly. From people who would use it in ways it shouldn't be used. Reeves felt something cold move through him. "You mean from the military itself?" "I mean from any institution," Ward said, "including this one." The room was very quiet. "She's not just a soldier," Reeves said. It was not a question. "She's a soldier who does a thing that nobody else on Earth can do," Ward said. "That creates certain exposures. If the full extent of that capability is documented in accessible channels, it becomes a resource that people will try to direct to control to deploy for purposes that may or may not align with—" He paused. "With what she'd choose, if the choice were hers." "Has she been given a choice?" "She's chosen to be here," Ward said. "She's chosen this assignment, the rank, the relative anonymity." He paused. "She's made very deliberate decisions about how visible she wants to be. And the oversight structure allows that." "The oversight structure was designed around what she needs," Ward said. "Not what the institution needs." He stopped. "That's all I can tell you, sir." Reeves looked at him for a long time. "One more question." "Sir, the classified context of the record, the 200-meter shot. You said people survived because of it." Ward said nothing. "Was she supposed to be the one to take it?" The silence lasted longer than any previous silence in the conversation. "No," Ward said quietly. "She wasn't." Reeves closed his eyes for 1 second. "Go," he said. Ward left. Reeves sat alone with the declined clearance request on his desk, and the weight of what he now understood, not the classified specifics, not the operational details, not the names and dates and coordinates that lived in whatever channels he couldn't access, but the shape of it. The human shape of it. A 20-year-old who was not supposed to be there in a position nobody had planned for doing something nobody else could do. And then carrying it alone in a file that nobody could read, while the people around her saw nothing but a young sergeant with an unusual badge. He thought about the maintenance bay. Her hands moving through the Barrett's disassembly with absolute certainty. The ventilation current in the gym that morning, Patel had told him about it. The way she had declined the technical advisor's offer of ballistic software verification. "I've run them. I don't need a second verification." Not arrogance, not ego. The certainty of someone who had learned at 20 years old that in the moment that actually mattered, the only verification available was herself. He stood up, picked up the clearance request, filed it in the waste bin, walked to the door, stopped. Because on his desk, delivered sometime in the past hour, and not yet opened, was a white envelope with no return address and no official markings. Just his name, written in plain block letters. He crossed back to the desk, opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature, no identifying information of any kind. 12 lines of text. He read them once, read them again slowly. Then he sat down heavily in his chair and set the paper flat on the desk with both hands, the way you set something down when you need your hands to stop shaking. Because the 12 lines of text were not about Maya Carter's past. They were about her future. And if what the 12 lines said was true, if the information in those lines was accurate, and the threat it described was real, then the oversight structure Ward had described, the careful, invisible architecture built around her and her capability, was already compromised. Someone knew who she was. Someone with resources and motive, and a very specific kind of patience. And they were already inside Black Ridge. He picked up his phone, called Brooks. "Find Sergeant Carter, right now. Don't call ahead. Just find her and stay with her until I get there." "Sir is there?" "Now, Lieutenant." He was already moving toward the door when his phone buzzed. A message from Brooks. "Found her, sir. Weapons Bay. She says she knows. She's waiting." He stopped walking. Read the message again. "She knows. She's waiting." He stood in the corridor outside his office and felt the full weight of that hit him. The understanding that he had been reading this situation wrong from the beginning. Not wrong about her capability. Not wrong about the badge or the file or the clearance. Wrong about something more fundamental. He had been thinking of himself as the one investigating, the one trying to understand, the senior officer pursuing information about the sergeant. But Maya Carter had been watching him since he walked into the weapons bay that first morning. She had been reading him the same way she read wind patterns and temperature differentials and the movement of air through ventilated spaces. She had been assessing him. And now she was in the weapons bay, waiting for him to arrive. Not because she needed him, because she had decided he was ready. He walked fast down the corridor, and for the first time in 34 years of command, General Jonathan Reeves was the one following. The weapons bay was quiet when he got there. Patel was outside the door, not standing guard exactly, but standing. Her expression told him that she knew something he didn't, and that she was not going to tell him what it was. He pushed through the door. Maya was seated at the equipment bench, not cleaning a weapon, not running a calculation. She had a plain notebook open in front of her, and she was writing. When he entered, she finished the sentence she was writing, capped the pen, and looked up. "Close the door, sir." He closed it. "Sit down." He sat. A general taking instruction from a sergeant, and neither of them remarking on it. She pushed a photograph across the bench toward him. A surveillance image, grainy, taken in low light. A man in civilian clothing in what appeared to be the facility's east corridor. The timestamp in the corner read 0217. "Who is this?" Reeves said. "I don't know his name," Maya said. "But he's been here for 4 days. He's accessed the weapons storage manifest twice, the personnel assignment board once, and the atmospheric data server." She paused. "That last one is the one that matters. Nobody accesses the atmospheric data server unless they're planning a long-range operation, or unless they're planning to understand the conditions of someone else's." Reeves looked up from the photograph. "You've been monitoring him." "I've been monitoring the facility," she said. "There's a difference, but in this case it leads to the same result." "Does Ward know?" "Ward's been informed. He's running a parallel track." She paused. "But I wanted to talk to you first." "Why me?" She looked at him with that direct, unhurried assessment. "Because you sent the clearance request," she said. "Most generals walk in here, see the badge, and leave satisfied with the shape of the secret. You pushed. And when the push came back declined, you called Ward, and Ward told you more than he tells most people." She paused. "That means you're either very motivated by curiosity, which is a liability in this situation, or you're motivated by something else." "What else?" "The thing that makes someone push past the badge," she said quietly, "isn't curiosity. It's that you recognized something was wrong, before you knew the details, before the clearance decline, Before Ward told you what he told you. She looked at him steadily. You walked in yesterday morning and you saw me and you grabbed the rifle, and then you saw the badge and something shifted in you before you had a single additional fact. She paused. What shifted? He was very quiet for a moment. I realized, he said, that I'd made a decision about you before I looked at you. Yes, sir? That's not... He stopped. That's not an excuse. I know it's not, she said. It's also not the first time. She said it without accusation, without bitterness, as a simple fact delivered in the same tone as the atmospheric data. Accurate, impersonal, true. What I want to know is what you do with it afterward. A person can recognize their mistake, sir. That's not rare. What's rare is deciding to do something different because of it. The room was quiet. The envelope I received, he said. The 12 lines. Her expression didn't move. You sent it. Still nothing. Maya, he said. It was the first time he had used her name. Just her name without rank, and they both noticed it. Someone inside this facility, she said, knows what I can do. They know the specific capability, not the badge is designed to obscure. They know the operational details, the conditions, the precision of the technique. She paused. That level of knowledge doesn't come from a file they could access. It comes from someone who was there, someone who was on that operation. Yes, sir. And they're here now. They've been here, she said, for 4 days. He looked at the photograph again, the grainy image of a man in civilian clothes in a corridor where civilians should not be. He thought about the envelope, the 12 lines, the absence of letterhead signature, any identifying information, a document that traced back to no one. You wrote it, he said. The letter. You wrote it yourself and had someone deliver it to my office. She said nothing. Why? He said. If you know about the threat, if Ward knows, why tell me at all? Why pull me into this? She picked up the pen, set it down again, and then she said something that he had not expected. Something that landed in the middle of the quiet room and changed the temperature of everything. Because the person in that photograph, she said, is not here for me. He stared at her. They're here for the new system, she said. The weapons development evaluation I mentioned. The long-range precision platform. It's not fully tested yet. It's not deployed. But if someone with the right motivation and the right resources understands what it can do, what I can do with it... She stopped. She looked at him. That is a different category of problem than one person with a classified file. He felt the full weight of that settle through him. Completely. Like a temperature change that started in the chest and radiated outward. One person, one capability that was a security concern. Manageable. Containable. The apparatus for containing it was already in place, but a system. A new system untested, undeployed, whose full operational parameters existed only in the minds of the people working on it, and one person who could take that system to ranges and accuracies that no documented capability had ever achieved. That was not a security concern. That was a target. And Black Ridge facility at this moment was exactly where both elements sat. What do you need from me? He said. She looked at him across the equipment bench, and for the first time since he had walked into this facility, Maya Carter allowed something to show in her expression that was not assessment, not calculation, not the composed professional distance she maintained with the precision of someone who had learned to maintain it under conditions he couldn't imagine. Something that looked very briefly like relief. I need you to trust me, she said. Not because of the badge, not because of the distance or the demonstration, but because what comes next is going to require someone with your authority who is willing to act on information they can't fully verify in a timeline they can't fully control. She paused. Are you that person, sir? The question sat between them. Jonathan Reeves had spent 34 years in the military, making decisions on incomplete information with insufficient time and consequences he couldn't predict. He looked at the photograph, looked at the woman who had been monitoring his facility, assessing his character, writing him letters he wasn't supposed to trace, pulling him into a situation she had understood long before he arrived, and doing all of it with the same quality of stillness she brought to a 300-meter shot. He said, "Tell me everything you can tell me." She opened the notebook, and she began. She talked for 40 minutes. Not continuously, she stopped, recalculated, redirected. She went back and corrected herself twice, not because she was uncertain, but because she was precise, and precision sometimes required revision. She spoke the way she shot, steady, economical, no wasted motion. Reeves listened without interrupting. He had developed this capacity over decades of command, the ability to receive information in real time without processing it through the filter of what he already believed. Most senior officers lost that capacity somewhere around the colonel level, when the gap between what they expected to hear and what they actually heard became too uncomfortable to sustain without filtering. Reeves had kept it mostly through deliberate effort and partly through the experience of being wrong enough times to understand what the cost of premature certainty looked like. He was very glad he had kept it now. What Maya told him, the parts she could tell him, was not the operational classified material. It was the architecture of what was happening at Black Ridge. The weapons development evaluation she'd mentioned, not a single platform, but a system of interconnected components. A new long-range precision delivery framework that combined advanced ballistic computation with real-time environmental sensing. The theory behind it had been in development for years. The practical application had stalled because the human element, the operator who could actually use the system at its designed parameters, didn't exist. Until Maya. "The system is designed around my capability," she said, not with pride, with the flat factual precision of a technical briefing. Specifically around the environmental reading component. Most precision systems are built to reduce the shooter's cognitive load, to handle as many variables as possible computationally, so the operator only needs to execute the physical mechanics. This one is built the other way. It amplifies the shooter's environmental read. It takes what I do intuitively and gives it a data layer. Makes it teachable, Reeves said. Eventually, yes. The goal is to document the process so it can be replicated, so it's not dependent on one person. She paused. Which is the correct goal. One person is a liability. A documented, reproducible process is an asset. But right now it is dependent on one person. Right now, she said, yes. Reeves looked at the photograph again. The man in the East Corridor. 0217 hours. If someone wanted to understand the system, what it does, what you can do with it, what would they need access to? The atmospheric data server, she said immediately. It logs my environmental reads during testing. Every session produces a data record of what I identified, when I identified it, and how it affected the shot. It's the most complete documentation of the technique that exists anywhere. She paused. More complete than anything in my classified file, because the file documents outcomes. The server documents process. And he accessed it. 3 times in 4 days. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Does he know what he's looking at? Whoever he is. He accessed it in sessions of less than 8 minutes each, Maya said. He wasn't reading for understanding. He was copying. The word dropped into the room and sat there, copying. You've been monitoring his access, Reeves said. I monitor all access to the atmospheric server. I set that up in the first week here. She met his eyes. Because I knew the data was the vulnerability. I told Colonel Ward. Ward agreed it was a risk and said he'd address it through security channels. She paused. He did. Standard protocols were tightened. Access logging was improved. Another pause. But whoever this is bypassed the improved logging, which means they either had help from inside the facility's security structure, or they have technical access that shouldn't exist. Reeves felt that travel through him. the specific cold of institutional compromise. Not an outside threat penetrating a secure facility, a penetration that required inside knowledge, inside access, inside collaboration. You think someone in this facility is helping them? I think it's possible, she said carefully. I haven't confirmed it. But the envelope you sent me was sent because I needed to move you faster than the evidence allowed, she said. I have surveillance images and server access logs. I don't have enough for Colonel Ward to take to official channels without a 2-week process that this situation doesn't have 2 weeks to wait for. She looked at him directly. You have the authority to act on incomplete information. Ward doesn't, not in this institutional context. He sat with that for a moment. The specific weight of it. She had not pulled him into this because he was the most senior person available. She had pulled him in because his rank gave him the authority to move without the bureaucratic constraints that Ward operated under. She had used him, precisely, with full awareness of what she was doing. You're running your own operation, he said. I'm protecting the work, she said. There's a difference. She considered the question seriously. Yes, an operation has objectives, targets, an endpoint. I'm not trying to catch anyone. I'm trying to protect something. She paused. The distinction matters because it changes what I'm willing to do. He looked at her. What are you not willing to do? She was quiet for a moment. Long enough that he understood the question had weight. I won't let them take it, she said. What I've built, what this system represents. I won't allow it to be used in ways that it wasn't designed to be used. She paused. That's the line. Everything before the line I can work with. And if they're already past the data, he said. If the 3 access sessions are enough, if they already have what they came for. Then we move to the next problem, she said without hesitation, which is making sure they can't deploy what they have. He looked at her for a long moment. 34 years of military service. He had given orders that sent soldiers into positions they didn't come back from. He had authorized operations under incomplete intelligence, with incomplete confidence in the outcomes. He had sat in rooms where the decision being made was the least bad option among a set of options that were all bad. He had never sat across from a 27-year-old sergeant who was running a counterintelligence operation inside a secure military facility with a notebook, a surveillance photograph, and a calibrated read of an adversary she'd been tracking for 4 days. What do you need me to do? He said. She opened the notebook to a specific page, turned it to face him. He read it. Then he looked up. You want me to authorize a second demonstration, he said. Yes, sir. Tomorrow morning. Extended range. Same setup as yesterday. Similar setup. One difference. She reached across and pointed to the 3rd line. Different target location. He read the coordinates. Looked up again. That's outside the facility's established range perimeter. Yes, sir. That requires a separate operational clearance, which you can authorize in 30 minutes if you choose to, she said. Your field authority at this facility is sufficient. He read the line again. The coordinates placed the target in the valley below the North Ridge, not the established range corridor. Open terrain, naturally occurring atmospheric complexity, and a sight line that from the weapons bay passed directly through the east corridor of the facility. Not past it, through it. Anyone in the east corridor watching a demonstration at that target location would need to be in a specific position, a position that could be monitored. You're not setting up a demonstration, he said. I'm setting up a controlled situation, she said. A demonstration that requires our friend in the east corridor to make a decision about his position. If he wants to observe the shot, understand the technique, gather live data, he has to be in a place we can see him from. And if he moves, then we know he's not here for the data, she said. He's here for something else. And that tells us something equally important. Reeves looked at her. This is either very smart or very dangerous. Both, sir, she said without hesitation. Usually both. He sat back, looked at the ceiling for a moment. At the blank institutional white of it, which had no information and therefore no complications. I need to talk to Ward, he said. Ward already knows the plan, she said. He's been informed. He has 3 people he trusts positioned in the facility as of this morning. He's waiting for your authorization to activate them. Since when? Since 0400, sir. He stared at her. You briefed Ward at 0400. I briefed Ward at 0400. And you came to me at, 8:20, she said. After I finished the atmospheric calibration and had Specialist Patel's conversation and confirmed the server access log from last night. She met his eyes. I needed to finish my assessment of you before I brought you in fully. The room was very quiet. Your assessment of me, he repeated. I needed to know, she said, whether you were someone I could work with. Not someone I could report to. Not someone I could use for access. Someone I could actually work with. She paused. The difference matters. He looked at her for a long time. And you're here, she said. That's the answer. He exhaled, picked up the notebook, read through the plan again more slowly this time with the professional attention of someone looking for gaps and liabilities and the places where things could go wrong in ways the plan hadn't accounted for. There were 2 gaps. He identified them. He pointed to them in the notebook. Here, he said. If he's got an extraction plan already in motion, the demonstration timeline puts him in a position where he can execute it before we can identify and isolate him. Maya looked where he was pointing. That's correct. And here. He pointed to the second gap. If there's an inside collaborator, they can alert him to the monitoring positions before he needs to make his decision about the East Corridor. Also correct, she said. You know about both of these. Yes, sir. And the first gap closes if we move the demonstration time up by 90 minutes, she said. 0530 instead of 0700. He won't have received his morning communication from outside the facility yet. He operates on a contact schedule. I've tracked the pattern. His morning window is between 0600 and 0630. You've tracked his communication schedule. I've tracked when he moves to the communication secure areas of the facility. The pattern is consistent. She paused. Consistent patterns are information. Reeves looked at her. He thought about the ventilation current, the atmospheric data, the 4 days of patient observation before she had written that letter and put it in an envelope with no return address. And the second gap, she said, is why I needed you. He waited. If there's an inside collaborator, she said, they're in the security structure or the command structure. Ward can't move against either without triggering the very alert we're trying to prevent. You can. She paused. You can restructure the morning duty assignment under operational authority without explanation. You can move people off their posts and put different people in without anyone having the standing to question it. You want me to reassign the East Corridor duty between now and 0530 tomorrow morning. I want you to reassign the entire overnight watch in the eastern section, she said. Put Ward's people in those positions, under cover of a standard rotation review. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something he had not done with a subordinate in at least 15 years. He said, Do you understand what you're asking me to authorize? If this goes wrong, if the threat isn't what you think it is, if the man in the photograph has a legitimate reason to be here that we haven't identified, I am a 4-star general who has reassigned facility security based on information from a sergeant whose file I can't even read. I understand, sir. My career is at risk. Yes, sir, I understand that. And your assessment is that the risk is worth it. She looked at him steadily. My assessment, sir, is that the risk of not acting is significantly higher than the risk of acting incorrectly. The data on the atmospheric server, if it's already been transmitted out of the facility, represents the compromise of a system that isn't yet deployed and that we still have a chance to protect. She paused. If we wait for perfect confirmation, we lose the window. If we act on incomplete information, and I'm wrong about the inside collaborator, the worst outcome is that a general looks overcautious. If I'm right and we don't act, she stopped. He finished the sentence in his own mind. If she was right, and they didn't act the thing she had spent years building the system that didn't yet exist anywhere except in her, and in those server logs, would be in the hands of someone whose intentions they couldn't verify. He picked up his phone. Called Brooks. "Get me the overnight duty roster for the Eastern section," he said. "And get me Colonel Ward. Tell him I want to see both of them in 20 minutes. He set the phone down, looked at Maya. "One more question," he said. "The man in the photograph. You said you don't know his name." "Correct. But you know something about him." He watched her face. "The way you describe his communication schedule, his access pattern, his decision timeline. That's not the profile of someone you've been watching for 4 days. That level of behavioral prediction requires a longer read." She was very still. "Have you seen him before?" Reeves said. The silence lasted 4 seconds, which in a conversation with Maya Carter, who never wasted time or language, was a very long silence. "Not in person," she said finally. "But you know who he is." "I know what he is," she said. "I've seen his work, not here, elsewhere." She paused. "He doesn't collect intelligence for governments." Reeves went very still. "He's private," she said. "Contracted. He works for whoever has the resources to retain him, and his specific specialty is the acquisition of precision capability documentation. Military-civilian research level." She paused. "He's done this before. Different facilities, different countries. The pattern is consistent." "You've been tracking him. The oversight structure I'm part of has been tracking him," she said carefully. "For approximately 18 months. He's surfaced 3 times in that period. This is the 4th. She paused. "The first 3 times we were too slow." The weight of that settled over the room. The first 3 times they were too slow. "What did he take?" Reeves said. "The first time, partial ballistic documentation from a European research facility. The second time, target acquisition software from a South Korean defense contractor. The third time..." She stopped. "The third acquisition hasn't surfaced yet, which means either it's being held for deployment or it's still in transit." She met his eyes. "Or it was a proof of capability demonstration for a buyer who needed to see it work before committing. And now he's here for the atmospheric data. The atmospheric data is worth more than the first 3 acquisitions combined," she said. "Not because of what it is, because of what it enables. The documentation of environmental reading at this level of precision, if it's combined with the right hardware platform and a sufficiently skilled operator." She paused. "It creates a capability that currently exists only here, only with me, only in an oversight structure designed to ensure it's used appropriately. And in the wrong hands. There is no wrong-hand version of this capability that ends well," she said quietly. "That's not hyperbole, sir. That's the honest assessment of everyone who has worked on this system." She paused. "Which is why the oversight structure exists. Which is why my file is what it is. Which is why I've chosen to be a sergeant who shows up at 05:30 and goes home at night and doesn't attend the meetings about the meetings." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up. "20 minutes," he said. "Ward, Brooks, and you, my office." She closed the notebook, stood. "Sir," she said. "What?" "Thank you for not asking me to let someone else handle it." He looked at her. "Would you have let someone else handle it?" She picked up the photograph from the bench, looked at it for a moment, set it down. "No," she said, "but it matters that you didn't ask." The meeting in his office lasted 47 minutes and covered ground that Reeves would not have been able to predict 48 hours earlier when he had walked into the weapons bay and seen a young sergeant standing behind a rifle she'd authorized herself to hold. Ward arrived with the precise economy of movement that characterized everything he did, assessed the situation in the first 4 minutes, and spent the next 43 operating at the level of professional competence that explained why his file was as inaccessible as Maya's. He confirmed 3 things his people were in position. The East Corridor overnight assignment could be restructured by 2100 without raising flags. And the atmospheric server could be locked, not shut down, locked with a monitoring layer that would alert if accessed again within the next 2 hours. "Lock it," Reeves said. Now. Ward nodded to Brooks, who made the call. The demonstration, Ward said. Oh, 5:30. I'll authorize the range extension, Reeves said. Extended corridor to the North Valley coordinates. Cover it as a follow-up evaluation. Personnel, Ward said. Who's on the range? Minimal, Maya said. Holloway, Patel, one technical observer. She paused. No additional audience. DeSalvo had requested observer access through the standard morning evaluation schedule. Reeves looked at Ward. Ward shook his head once. Fractional, but clear. DeSalvo is reassigned to equipment review, Reeves said to Brooks. Effective immediately. Framed as a general review order. Standard language. Brooks wrote it down. And the inside question, Reeves said. The potential collaborator. Ward was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Sergeant Holloway. The room went still. Reeves looked at him. Holloway's been running this range for 6 years. Yes, sir. Ward's voice was completely flat. He also accessed the personnel assignment board 3 days ago at 03:10 in the morning. Not the security board. The personnel assignment board, which tells you who's going to be where in the facility on any given day. He paused. He and the man in the photograph accessed the east corridor within an hour of each other on Tuesday night. Circumstantial, Reeves said. Yes, sir. Entirely circumstantial. Ward paused. Which is why I didn't act on it through official channels. He looked at Maya. Reeves looked at Maya too. She was looking at the floor. Not in avoidance in thought. The specific downward focus of someone running a calculation. If Holloway is involved, she said slowly, then the demonstration doesn't accomplish what we need it to accomplish. He'll know the monitoring positions. He'll know where Ward's people are. Yes, Ward said. And if he's not involved, she said, and we pull him from the range tomorrow morning, we lose the most experienced range master on the facility for an operation that requires precision range management. Also yes, Ward said. The room was quiet. Reeves looked at Maya. What do you need from the range master tomorrow morning? Target confirmation at the 3-100 position before the shot, she said. And communication relay between the firing position and Ward's team. Can Patel do the target confirmation? Maya looked up. Yes. And the communication relay? Brooks, Maya said. Brooks, who had been sitting quietly at the edge of the conversation, looked up with an expression that mixed professional readiness with something that might have been terror. Sir, Brooks said carefully. You're on the range tomorrow, Reeves said. Patel confirms the target. You run communication. He looked at Ward. Holloway doesn't find out about the 0530 time change until 0515. Ward nodded. 15 minutes notice. Not enough time to alert. And if he tries anyway, then we know, Ward said simply. Reeves looked around the room. At Brooks, who was writing everything down with the focused energy of someone converting anxiety into productivity. At Ward, who was already 2 steps ahead of the current moment, running contingencies in the background of his expression. At Maya, who had stopped looking at the floor and was looking at him with the same quality of attention she gave the ridgeline at 0615, reading the current. Reading where it was going. 0515, Reeves said. All positions confirmed. I want status from Ward before I authorize the range hot. Ward stood. I'll be in contact at 0500. He paused at the door, looked at Maya. Something passed between them, not a look exactly, more the acknowledgement of a shared understanding that predated this room, this facility, this general. Don't get ahead of yourself, he said to her. Never, she said. Ward left. Brooks gathered his notes and followed, pulling the door behind him. The office was quiet. Reeves and Maya sat across from each other in the particular silence of 2 people who had just spent 3 hours building something together and understood that tomorrow morning was the test of whether it was built right. Get some sleep, he said. I will. She stood, picked up the notebook. Sir? What? The 3 200-meter record, she said. The classified context. She paused. What Ward told you that I wasn't supposed to be the one to take the shot. He was right. The primary operator was down. There were 3 soldiers in an extraction corridor that was about to close. The shot was the only option that kept the corridor open long enough. She paused. I'm not telling you this because I need you to know. I'm telling you because tomorrow, if it goes wrong, if the situation in the East Corridor develops in a way that requires a decision that goes beyond the plan, I need you to understand that I don't calculate risk the way the manual calculates risk. He looked at her. How do you calculate it? I calculate what's at stake, she said. And I calculate what I can do. And if those 2 things align, she stopped. I act, regardless of whether I was supposed to be the one. He held her gaze for a long moment. Understood, he said. She left. He sat alone in the office in the quiet that she had left behind, and he thought about all of it. The photograph, the notebook, Ward's flat recitation of Holloway's access log, the atmospheric server now locked and monitored, holding the most complete documentation of a human capability that possibly had no precedent in the recorded history of the discipline. He thought about a 20-year-old in a position she wasn't supposed to occupy, with a corridor closing and 3 soldiers on the wrong side of it. He thought about the sound a .50 caliber round makes when it hits a steel plate at 300 meters. That clean, distant, undeniable clang. He thought about DeSalvo in the maintenance bay an hour after the demonstration, who Patel had reported was sitting alone, field stripping his sidearm, with a very specific kind of quietness. He thought about Brooks, who was going to spend tomorrow morning on a live range running communications for an operation he had not been trained for, and who had said sir and written everything down and asked no questions that weren't necessary. Which was, Reeves reflected, actually a very high form of courage. He thought about Maya Carter walking back to her quarters, through the facility's evening corridors with a notebook and a photograph, and the atmospheric data for tomorrow already running in her head. He did not think she was going to sleep. He set his own phone on the desk, looked at it for a moment. Then he opened it and typed a message to his office in Washington. Secondary clearance request, different parameters. Need the name behind the tracking designation. Acquisition Specialist, Private Contract, European Theater Activity, 18 months prior. Black Ridge Priority. He sent it. Looked at the ceiling. The answer came back in 9 minutes, which was not 48 hours, which was not the standard response time. 9 minutes meant someone at his Washington office had been waiting for this specific question. He opened the message. He read the name. He read it again. And the 3rd time he read it, he understood why Maya had said the first 3 times we were too slow. He understood the weight behind those words, the specific heaviness of them, because the name on his screen was not an unknown. It was a name that appeared in exactly one document he had read in his career, a counterintelligence brief from 3 years ago, so sanitized and redacted that he had considered it largely theoretical. The name had a body now, a body that was inside Black Ridge facility, in the East Corridor, accessing data that it had no right to touch. He set the phone face down on the desk, took one breath, then he picked the phone back up and sent one more message. Not to Washington, not to Brooks or Ward, to Maya. I have the name. Come to my office. He waited. 2 minutes passed. Then her response arrived. 3 words. I already know. He stared at it. 3 words, and the full understanding arrived with them. The understanding that she had known the name before she came to his office that morning. Before the notebook. Before the plan. Before the request for the demonstration. She had known who it was. She had built the entire plan not to identify the threat. She had built it to contain someone she had already identified. Someone she had been building toward for how long? Months since, before she arrived at Black Ridge, he was not the senior officer who had pulled her into this situation. He was the piece she had been waiting for. The authority she needed to activate the final stage of something that had been in motion long before he walked into the weapons bay and grabbed a rifle out of her hands. He sat very still with that for a long time. Then he typed back, "How long?" Her answer came in under 30 seconds. Since the third acquisition, 11 months ago. He set the phone down, looked at the wall. 11 months. She had been tracking this person for 11 months, building toward a moment and a location where the conditions would be right. Where the target would come to her rather than her going to it. Where the situation would produce a natural, verifiable, controlled resolution. She hadn't come to Black Ridge for the weapons evaluation. She had come because she knew he was going to come here. She had manufactured the conditions, the assignment, the demonstration, the server data, the visible capability that would draw him in. She had built a 300-meter shot, except the target wasn't on the range. The target was in the east corridor, and she hadn't used a rifle. She had used a general. Reeves looked at his own reflection in the darkened window across the room. He thought about what she had said. "Are you that person, sir?" Someone who can act on information they can't fully verify in a timeline they can't fully control. He had said yes. He had meant it. He still meant it. But sitting in the quiet of his office at 21:47 hours with the name of a private intelligence contractor on his phone and 11 months of patient maneuvering. Finally arriving at its endpoint, Jonathan Reeves understood something about Maya Carter that he had not understood before. She was not a soldier who found herself in situations. She was a soldier who built them. Soldier. And tomorrow morning, at 05:30, on a range extended to a target that sat along a sightline through the east corridor of Black Ridge Military Facility, the situation she had been building for 11 months was going to arrive at its conclusion. He picked up the phone one more time. Typed, "Get some sleep." Set it down. This time no answer came back, which meant she was already asleep. Or she was standing at her window, reading the thermal current in the facility's exterior air, calculating the morning atmospheric differential, listening to the system as a whole. Reeves turned off his desk lamp. Tomorrow was going to require everything he had. He was beginning to understand that it was also going to require everything she was. And whatever that was, whatever the full shape of Maya Carter's capability, actually encompassed beyond the shot and the badge and the 11 months and the notebook and the plan, he had not seen it yet. Tomorrow, he was going to see it. Reeves was awake at 03:45, not because his alarm went off, because something in the quality of the facility's silence changed, and 34 years of operational instinct translated that change into a physical response before his conscious mind caught up. He was sitting upright with his hand on his phone before he fully understood why. The phone showed nothing. No messages from Ward, no alerts from Brooks. The facility systems were quiet. He sat in the dark and listened. Nothing. He lay back down, stared at the ceiling, gave himself 4 minutes to see if sleep was a realistic option. It was not. At 03:49 he dressed, poured water from the carafe on his desk because the coffee was finished, and sat down to wait. At 04:12 his phone moved. Ward. One line, Holloway's not in his quarters. Reeves read it twice. Typed back, when Ward last confirmed 02:30, routine check at 0400 empty. Reeves stood up. Options. Ward 3. He's running an early personal routine. He's been alerted and is positioning. He's already moved. Reeves looked at the third option for a long moment. Contact status on our target. Ward East Corridor clear. Last confirmed position, 0130. His quarters unknown. Door sensor shows no exit since 2300. Door sensor can be bypassed. Ward didn't answer immediately. The pause was 4 seconds, which from Ward meant the answer was yes, and he didn't like saying it. Yes, Ward sent. If you know the facility layout. Reeves put on his jacket. Typed, move the demonstration to 0500. Alert Patel and Brooks now. I'm coming to you. He left his quarters. The corridor outside was empty, which was normal for 0415, but felt different now. Not the normal emptiness of a facility in its overnight cycle, but the specific charged emptiness of a place where something was already in motion, and the visible surface hadn't caught up yet. He moved fast. Not running a general running through a facility corridor at 0415 produced exactly the kind of attention that the situation didn't need. But fast, purposeful. He reached the operations hub in 4 minutes. Ward was already there along with 2 of his people, a man named Tanner and a woman named Solace, both in civilian clothes, both with the particular quality of stillness that spoke to extensive operational experience. They were looking at a facility map on the wall display, and the map had 3 locations marked in red. "Talk to me," Reeves said. "Holloway's access card last pinged here," Ward said, pointing. "East Utility Corridor. The service passage that ran parallel to the main East Corridor. At 0318. "That's the route behind the communications relay station," Reeves said. "Yes, sir. If you wanted to intercept a communication going out of this facility before 0600, that's where you'd do it." "Yes, sir." Reeves looked at the map. "And our target. Still showing as in quarters by door sensor, but Tanner did a visual on the exterior window at 0400. Ward nodded to Tanner. Tanner said, "Curtain position changed between 2300 and 0400. Could be sleep movement. Could be he's dressed and positioned at the window, which means he's watching the exterior and he's been alerted." "By Holloway." Tanner said nothing. Ward said, "Possible." Reeves looked at the map for another 2 seconds. Then he said, "Where's Maya?" Ward pointed to a 4th marker on the map. "Weapons bay." "She's been there since 0330, Ward said. Something in his voice, not admiration, not surprise, the specific tone of someone confirming what they expected to find. "She came in through the side entrance. Holloway's card reader, not the main bay access. Which means she didn't show up on the standard entry log. She bypassed the log. She bypassed the log." Ward paused. "She knew Holloway was going to check who was in the bay." Reeves looked at him. "She knew about Holloway before last night." Ward said nothing, which was its own answer. "How long has she known?" Reeves said. "I believe." Ward said carefully, "She identified the inside element before she identified the external target. The external target confirmed her when he arrived because the pattern of his access followed a behavioral signature she was already looking for." He paused. "She told me last week that the inside element was most likely range personnel with long tenure facility knowledge. I ran a quiet background check on all long tenure range staff, found a financial irregularity in Holloway's record." He paused again. "Small, easily missed. But she didn't miss it. She didn't look for it in the financial records," Ward said. "She found it in his behavior, in the way he positioned himself during her qualification sessions, the specific angle he chose. She said he was learning her technique from observation." Ward looked at the map. "A range master with 6 years at this facility watching a shooter work at extreme distance, that's normal. But she said the angle was wrong for a range master. A range master watches the shot. He was watching the pre-shot process, the environmental read." Ward paused. "She said nobody watches the pre-shot process unless they understand what they're looking at." The room was quiet. Reeves thought about DeSalvo in the lounge saying, 3,200 meters is physically impossible. Thought about Patel watching Maya tilt the bipod and naming the technique before anyone else in the room could process what they were seeing. Thought about the difference between someone who watched a shot and someone who watched a shooter. "Call Maya," he said to Ward. Ward's phone was already in his hand. He held it out to Reeves. On the screen, a short text exchange. Ward had sent status. Maya had responded 6 minutes ago. Ready. One problem. Reeves looked up. What problem? Ward took the phone back. Typed. The response came in 40 seconds. Ward read it. His expression did something that Reeves had not seen Ward's expression do before. It tightened. Not in fear in the professional reckoning of someone receiving information that changes the calculation. He turned the phone toward Reeves. Maya's message read, "The data was transmitted." Not the server log, something older. He brought in documentation from outside. Original source material, pre-facility. He came with more than he needed to take. Reeves read it twice. He brought documentation in. "He didn't just come to collect," Ward said. "He came to deliver." The cold moved through Reeves again, faster this time. "To whom?" Ward was already typing. Maya's response came in 20 seconds. "Holloway." The transmission happened at 0318 in the East Utility Corridor, which is why Holloway was there. Reeves looked at the map. The red marker in the East Utility Corridor. 0318. It wasn't Holloway delivering to the external target. It was the other direction. The external target had brought something in and passed it to Holloway, who now had it somewhere in the facility. "What did he bring in?" Reeves said. Ward typed. Waited. Maya's response took longer this time, 90 seconds, which was for Maya a very long time. When the response came, Ward read it and handed the phone to Reeves without speaking. Targeting package. Pre-calculated. Someone outside has already done the environmental analysis on this facility, not just the server data, the physical layout, the range parameters, the sight lines. The package Holloway received is a deployment brief. They're not taking the capability. They're demonstrating it. Against this facility. Someone outside wants to know if the system works at this range in these conditions against a real installation. Holloway is the ground confirmation element. Reeves read it a third time. The plan he had been operating under for the past 12 hours inverted itself completely. Not acquisition. Demonstration. Someone outside Black Ridge had already reconstructed enough of Maya's technique from the first 3 acquisitions from 18 months of analysis to attempt a proof-of-concept deployment. A live demonstration against an active military facility. And the confirmation that it worked, the ground-level assessment of what happened, the physical evidence, was what Holloway had been positioned to provide. "They're going to shoot at this facility," Reeves said. "At something in this facility," Ward said. "A high-value confirmation target." Reeves looked at him. "The new system. The weapons development hardware. Or the person," Ward said quietly. The room was absolutely silent. Reeves looked at the map, looked at the marker in the weapons bay. His phone moved. Brooks. Ready at range position. Patel in position. Waiting for authorization to go hot. Reeves typed back, "Hold. Do not go hot. Stay with Patel. Do not move from position." He looked at Ward. "Get Maya out of the weapons bay." Ward was already dialing. 3 rings. 4. Ward's jaw moved once. "She's not picking up," he said. "Go," Reeves said to Tanner and Solis. "Weapons bay, now." They moved, fast, not running, but close. Reeves turned to Ward. "The external target, his quarters. We need eyes on him right now." Ward pulled up a secondary channel, spoke low and fast. Waited. The response came back in 30 seconds, and Ward's expression shifted in a way that closed something off in Reeves's chest. "His room is empty," Ward said. "The door sensor bypass, he used it at 0340. He's been out for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. While Reeves was sitting in his office reading Ward's message about Holloway, the external target had already moved. "Exterior positions," Reeves said. "2 of mine are on the perimeter," Ward said. "North and east. I'm pulling them into—" "Don't," Reeves said. Ward stopped. "If you pull them in, he knows the perimeter is active, and he moves to a secondary position that we don't know about." Reeves was thinking out loud fast, the way he had learned to think in rooms where the timeline compressed. "Keep the perimeter positions. Redirect their attention south of the North Ridge. Make it look like we're checking the range corridor for the demonstration. Give him a direction to avoid. Give him a direction to avoid. And a direction that looks clear." He looked at the map. "The East Utility Corridor, where Holloway was. What's on the exterior of that corridor?" Ward's finger moved to the map. "Open ground. Flat approach. Approximately 800 meters to the facility wall from the tree line. That's not 200 meters. No, sir. But if someone has reconstructed the technique imperfectly with the data they've gathered over 18 months, they might be able to work at 800. Might be capable of 1,200. Ward paused. The new system hardware is in the East Wing storage. The East Utility Corridor is the access route. Reeves looked at the map for 2 seconds. Then his phone moved again. Not Ward, not Brooks. An unknown number. One message. General Reeves, the demonstration this morning is not your operation to run. Stand down and no one gets hurt. This is a professional courtesy. He showed it to Ward. Ward read it. His expression didn't move. He has your number. He has everything that Holloway could give him, Reeves said, which is everything in the facility's personnel assignment system. He typed back to the number professional courtesy acknowledged. I'll need a name. He didn't expect an answer. He sent it to buy 30 seconds of the target's attention. He got it. The response came in 11 seconds. You already have my name, General. Your Washington office sent it to you at 21:56 last night. Victor Lem. Reeves looked at Ward. He has eyes on my communications. Or Holloway does, Ward said. Holloway was in the utility corridor at 0318. The facility communications relay runs through that corridor. They had been inside the communications architecture for hours. Whatever Reeves had sent or received since the previous night, the Washington query, the name, response. The messages to Brooks and Patel, all of it had potentially passed through a compromised relay, including his messages to Maya. She doesn't have a phone that pings the facility relay, Ward said, reading his face. Her personal device runs on an external encrypted channel, separate architecture. He paused. She set that up in her first week here. Of course she had. Reeves typed to the unknown number Victor Lem. The European Theater 3 acquisitions. What do you want here? The response was immediate. What I always want. Confirmation that the product is what the documentation says it is. I have a buyer who requires proof of performance. He's stalling, Ward said. I know, Reeves said. So am I. He looked up. Can you get a location on this phone? Ward was already on it. He spoke into his secondary channel low and precise. Waited. 20 seconds. Northridge exterior, Ward said. Approximately 900 meters from the facility perimeter. Moving. Reeves looked at the map. Northridge. The same ridge that the established range corridor ran below. The ridgeline where the trees moved in the morning thermal current that Maya read every morning at 0615. He understood something then. A piece of the geometry that had been sitting at the edge of his awareness since he read Maya's message about the targeting package. Victor Lem had not come here just to collect the atmospheric data. He had come here to see it work. But he wasn't planning to shoot from outside and confirm a hit on the facility. He was planning to force a demonstration. He was going to put someone or something at a target distance and tell Maya to shoot. A proof of performance under duress. The buyer got the live demonstration. Holloway provided the physical documentation. Lem left with a deliverable that no amount of server data could replicate a confirmed live demonstration of the technique under real conditions with a documented outcome. He needs her to shoot, Reeves said. Ward went very still. He doesn't need to shoot at us, Reeves said. He needs us to shoot at him, or at something he controls, at a target he places, and he needs the data, the atmospheric read the correction, the first round confirmation to be documented in real time. He looked at Ward. He needs Holloway at the range to record the process. A forced demonstration, Ward said, and his leverage is. Reeves looked at the facility map, at the weapons bay marker, at the unanswered phone. Where's the new system hardware right now? Physically, Ward said, East Wing storage. Who has access? Ward's jaw worked once. Holloway. And there it was, the full shape of it. Lem didn't need a gun pointed at Maya. He didn't need a hostage in the traditional sense. He had the development hardware that the entire project, 3 years of work, the system that didn't yet exist anywhere else in the world depended on. Hardware that could be destroyed or removed in the time it took to respond to a message. He typed to Lem's number. "What's the target?" The response came in 5 seconds, North Valley. "The 3-100 position from your demonstration yesterday. Standard plate. First round hit, confirmed by your rangemaster and transmitted to my buyer in real time. Then we're done here." "He's asking her to do what she did yesterday," Reeves said. "Under coercion," Ward said. "With the threat of destroying the development hardware, which means everything she's built here. Every documented process, the physical platform, the system that makes the technique transferable." "Gone," Ward said. The phone in Reeves's hand felt very heavy. Ward was looking at him with a very specific quality of attention, not waiting for an order, assessing whether the man giving orders understood the full weight of the decision in front of him. Reeves looked at the facility map for 2 seconds. Then he typed to Lem. "I'll bring her to the range. 1 hour. Lem 40 minutes. And the rangemaster confirms the shot parameters to my channel in real time, or the hardware doesn't survive the morning." Reeves typed 40 minutes. He lowered the phone, looked at Ward. "Can Tanner and Solis reach the East Wing storage in the next 20 minutes? "Yes. Move the hardware. Not outside the facility. Move it inside. Secondary storage. Change the access log to show it's still in the original location." He paused. "If Holloway checks by card reader confirmation," Ward said. "The card reader shows what we tell it to show." He was already moving. "I need 4 minutes. "You have 3, Reeves said. Ward left. Reeves looked at his phone, looked at the time, looked at the map. Then he sent one message to Maya's external channel. "I know what he wants. Don't shoot." He waited. Her response came in 45 seconds. "I know what he wants too. I'm not going to shoot." Then 10 seconds later, "I'm going to do something better." He stared at that for a long moment. Typed, "Tell me." Her response, "Come to the weapons bay. Come alone. Come now." He went. She was at the equipment bench when he came through the side entrance. The Barrett was in front of her, fully assembled. She was not behind it. She was sitting beside it, notebook open, and she was writing something in a focused, rapid way that he had not seen from her before. Her normal precision was there, each character formed with the same control but faster. The speed of someone working to a deadline they have fixed in their own mind. He closed the door. "Talk to me," he said. She finished the line she was writing, capped the pen. "How much does Lem know about how the system works?" "He has the server logs from 3 access sessions. He has documentation from the first 3 acquisitions, 18 months of analysis." Reeves paused. "Enough to attempt a reconstruction, not enough to replicate it. Not enough to know what's actually variable and what's essential," she said. "He understands the output. He understands that I hit a target at 300 meters with 1 round under field conditions. He doesn't understand why." "The environmental read. He knows it exists," she said. "He doesn't know how I integrate it. The server logs show the data I read, not the process of reading it. To someone analyzing the logs, the environmental correction looks like a calculation, a formula, something you could write down and hand to another shooter." She paused. "It isn't." "What is it?" She looked at him for a moment. "It's a conversation," she said. "Between me and the air. You can't give someone else the conversation by documenting what was said. They'd have to learn to listen." He sat down across from her. "Lem wants a live demonstration with Holloway providing real-time documentation to a buyer." "I know." "He thinks he's going to get an observable, recordable proof of performance that a buyer can verify." "I know." "What are you actually going to give him?" She turned the notebook to face him. He read what she'd written. 3 paragraphs. Dense, technical. He read slowly, making sure he understood each piece before moving to the next. When he finished, he looked up. "This will work," he said. "It will work," she said, "if you trust me completely for the next 40 minutes. Define completely." I mean, that when I tell you not to stop what's happening, you don't stop it. Even if it looks wrong. Even if it looks like it's going sideways." She held his gaze. "Because the moment that matters is going to look like a failure before it becomes what it actually is. And if you intervene in that moment, we lose everything." He looked at her. "What moment?" "The shot," she said. He stared at her. "You just said you're not going to shoot." "I'm not going to give him the shot he came here for," she said. "I am going to fire the rifle. There's a difference." She paused. "A significant technical difference that will be obvious to me and to Ward and will be completely invisible to Holloway." She paused. "And to Lem." He looked at the notebook, back at her. "You're going to miss deliberately. I'm going to demonstrate a technique that produces an outcome," she said. "The outcome I choose." She paused. "Lem needs to see a shot. His buyer needs to see a shot. What neither of them can assess in real time from 900 meters on a north ridge is whether what they're observing is the technique they came to document or a very precise simulation of it. Can Holloway tell the difference? No," she said. "Holloway has watched me work for 3 weeks. He understands enough of the process to recognize it from the outside. He doesn't understand enough to know that what he's recording, what he transmits to Lem's channel, is not the capability they purchased." She paused. "What he transmits is a performance." Reeves sat with that for a long moment. The specific gravity of it, the technical elegance of it. A deliberate near miss calibrated precisely enough to look like a hit to everyone who couldn't get their hands on the actual ballistic data. A documented process that produced a real output, just not the output they thought they were observing. "And after," he said, "when they analyze the documentation, when the buyer looks at what Holloway transmitted and tries to use it, it won't replicate," she said, "because the process they documented isn't the process I use. It's a close enough approximation to fool a real-time observation, but not close enough to produce results at genuine operational parameters." She paused. "They'll get one shot that they believe confirms the capability. Every attempt after that will fail." She paused again. "And failure at 300 meters is its own kind of evidence." He looked at her for a long time. "You built this before you got here," he said. She didn't answer. "You built this 11 months ago," he said. "When you identified Lem after the third acquisition, you knew he was going to find you eventually because the data trail he was building was pointing here. So you came here. You set the conditions. You made Black Ridge the environment where you controlled every variable." He paused. "The demonstration yesterday wasn't for me." "It was partly for you," she said, "but primarily for Lem. You needed him to have real data from a real demonstration. Server logs plus live observation. You needed his documentation to be rich enough that he trusted what he was looking at today." She held his gaze. "And you needed his buyer to have enough faith in the documentation to stay invested through the morning." She paused. "If the buyer gets cold, Lem has no leverage and no reason to stay. And if the buyer stays invested," Reeves said slowly, "they're in contact with Lem throughout the morning, which means we can track the communication, which means we don't just get Lem." He looked at her. "We get the buyer." She said nothing. He looked at the notebook again, at the 3 paragraphs. "Ward can track Lem's outgoing transmission. Ward has been set up to intercept Lem's channel since 0330 this morning," she said. "He needed the facility communications relay to do it, which required Holloway to be in the East Utility Corridor at 0318, which required Lem to give Holloway the targeting package at that time and that location." She paused. "Because the relay access point in the East Utility Corridor is the only node in the facility that allows both inbound and outbound interception simultaneously." He stared at her. "You needed Holloway in that corridor," he said. "At 0318. You needed him to use the relay node." "I needed Lem to use Holloway to use the relay node," she said. "Which required Lem to trust Holloway, which required Lem to have found Holloway on his own through his normal contact-building process without any indication that Holloway had been identified." She paused. Which is why I told Ward about the financial irregularity last week and asked him not to act on it. He pressed both hands flat on the equipment bench, looked at the ceiling, looked back at her. You let Holloway operate, so Lem would trust him, so Lem would use the relay, so Ward could set up the interception, and so that when Lem transmits Holloway's documentation to the buyer this morning, she said Ward captures the transmission pathway, both ends. She paused. Not just Lem, the buyer, the financial chain, the network. She looked at him directly. The first 3 acquisitions failed because we caught individual events. This is the 4th acquisition. I didn't want to catch another event. I wanted to close the network. The room was very quiet. The weight of 11 months sat in it. DeSalvo, Reeves said suddenly. She looked at him. You reassigned DeSalvo last night, he said. I reassigned him based on Ward's nod, but you put that in motion. He paused. Why DeSalvo specifically? Something moved in her expression. DeSalvo has a brother who works in private defense consulting in Belgium. She paused. I have no evidence that DeSalvo is involved in anything. His brother's company has no confirmed connection to Lem's network. She paused. But DeSalvo specifically asked for observer access to this morning's demonstration, and his brother's company was a subcontractor on a defense project that was compromised in the 2nd acquisition. Might be coincidence. Might be, she said. I removed him from the range this morning as a precaution, not an accusation. She paused. If I'm wrong about DeSalvo, he loses one morning on a range. If I'm right and I leave him in position, everything falls apart. Reeves said. Everything falls apart. She agreed. He picked up his phone, looked at the time. 31 minutes remaining before the window Lem had specified. He typed to Ward Hardware, relocated Ward done. Log updated. 8 minutes ago. He typed interception channel ready, Ward ready since 0330, waiting for the transmission. He set the phone down, looked at Maya. One thing I still need to know. Sir? The deliberate miss. The performance shot. He looked at her. At 100 meters. You're going to fire a round that looks correct from every observable angle. It's going to have the right pre-shot process, the right timing, the right visible mechanics. He paused. And it's going to hit close enough to the target that Holloway documenting from the range position confirms a hit to Lem's channel. Yes, sir. But the documentation Holloway transmits the data record is going to be the wrong technique, a false process. Yes, sir. And the shot itself. He looked at her very directly. It's going to hit close enough to look like a hit on a target at 300 meters under field conditions, to someone on a ridge at 900 meters. He paused. How close? She looked at him for 1 second. 4 inches left of center, she said. At that distance from 900 meters on the north ridge with standard optics 4 inches is invisible. He stared at her. You can place a round 4 inches left of center at 300 meters deliberately. I can place it 4 inches left of center, she said, because I know exactly where center is. The same process that finds the target finds the offset. She paused. It's not harder. It's the same skill applied to a different coordinate. He looked at her for a long time. He thought about what Ward had said. She wasn't supposed to be the one to take the shot. A 20-year-old in a position nobody planned for doing something nobody else could do. And then this. 11 months. Every piece placed with the same precision. 4 inches left of center at 300 meters because she could. He picked up his phone, typed to Lem's number 40 minutes. Range will be hot. Sergeant Carter will be in position. Lem's response. Good decision. General? He looked at Maya. Let's go. She picked up the Barrett, stood, moved toward the range entrance with the settled, unhurried certainty that he had seen the very first morning, the certainty of someone who had already arrived at the outcome and was simply moving through the remaining steps. At the door, she stopped, turned back. Sir, she said. What? When it's done, when Ward has the transmission and the network is confirmed. She paused. Holloway is going to need to be detained before he can be alerted by Lem. She paused. The timing on that is going to be tight. 3 minutes after I fire, Ward needs to move on Holloway simultaneously with the signal confirmation. She paused. 3 minutes is the window. Ward knows this. Ward has the timing. Then why are you telling me? She looked at him steadily. Because in that 3-minute window, she said, Lem is going to contact you directly. He's going to tell you the demonstration is confirmed. He's going to be satisfied. He's going to begin extraction. She paused. He's going to sound like someone you should let go. Because if he extracts cleanly, he doesn't panic. He doesn't burn the transmission channel. He doesn't trigger a backup protocol that wipes the buyer contact data. She paused. You need to respond to him as though you're letting him go, for 3 minutes, while Ward closes both ends simultaneously. He held her gaze. You want me to thank him? I want you to be courteous, she said. Professional. The general who made a hard decision and honored the terms. She paused. For 3 minutes. He thought about 34 years. About every decision that required holding one thing steady while something else moved. About the specific discipline of not acting in the moments that required not acting. 3 minutes, he said. She nodded, pushed through the door. He followed her into the dark of the pre-dawn facility toward the weapons bay, toward the range, toward the moment that everything she had built for 11 months was finally going to arrive at its destination. Behind him, at the end of the corridor, a light came on in the communications relay station. Holloway was in position. The operation was live. And Jonathan Reeves, for the second time in 4 days, was following a 27-year-old sergeant through a door she had already decided to open. The range was cold at 0458. Not the comfortable cold of an early mountain morning, but the specific cold of a place that had been holding its breath for hours. Patel was already at the target confirmation position. Her radio clipped to her vest, her voice when she checked in with Brooks exactly flat and professional, in the way of someone who understood that this was not the morning for anything other than precision. Brooks was at the communication relay station, the secondary relay, not the East Utility Corridor node that Holloway was monitoring, and his voice when he responded to Patel had the quality of a man who had decided that fear was not a productive use of the next 40 minutes and had set it aside by main force of will. Ward's people were in position. Tanner on the East Corridor approach. Solis at the exterior perimeter north side, visible enough to give Lem on the north ridge exactly the sight line Ward wanted him to have, a clean line that confirmed the facility's attention was focused south and inward. Holloway was at the range master station. He had arrived at 0450, which was his normal time on a demonstration morning, and he had set up his equipment with the same professional routine of 6 years. And he had greeted Reeves when Reeves walked in with the same respectful economy that a range master extended to a general. No excess, no performance. The greeting of a man who had made his decision some time ago and was now simply executing it. Reeves had greeted him back. That had been the hardest moment so far. Maya was at the firing position. She had not spoken since they entered the bay. She had done what she always did, the pre-shot process that Holloway had watched for 3 weeks and that Lem had built a targeting package around, and that Reeves had now seen often enough to understand that it was not a ritual. It was a conversation. She stood and read the air and listened to what the morning was telling her, and she translated it into a language that existed only inside her. And when the translation was complete, she lowered herself behind the Barrett and became very still. Reeves stood 12 feet behind her left shoulder. His phone was in his hand. The time was 5:01. Lem's contact window opened at 0600. They were running 59 minutes early. The compression of the timeline was one of Maya's adjustments. She had told him in the weapons bay before they came out that Lem's contact window was when he received external communication, not when he was capable of acting. He's been on that ridge for at least an hour already, she'd said. He was in position before he messaged you. He was committed before the 40-minute window started. She had paused. Which means his extraction route is already fixed. If we run the demonstration before his contact window, he doesn't have current external communication. He's operating on his last briefing, His contingencies are frozen. An opponent operating on frozen contingencies. Unable to adapt in real time because the communication channel that would tell him to adapt wasn't open yet. 502. Reeves looked at Holloway. Holloway was at the range master station, his equipment set up, his documentation system active. He had a secondary device, not the standard range equipment, something smaller, personal, positioned at the edge of the station. Reeves had noticed it when he came in. Holloway had not tried to conceal it, which meant either he didn't think anyone would identify it as significant, or he was so committed to the operation that concealment no longer felt necessary. Reeves thought it was the latter. He looked at Maya. She was reading the ridgeline, the trees at the top of the north ridge catching the first pre-dawn thermal movement. He had seen her do this at 06:15 on her first morning standing in the gym reading the ventilation current. He had seen it on the range before the demonstration. The same quality of attention. The same complete absence of performance. She was listening. 5:04. His phone moved. Ward. Holloway's secondary device is transmitting. He opened a channel 2 minutes ago. Lem is receiving pre-shot setup confirmation. So Lem knew they were running early. He had eyes through Holloway before the shot happened. The compressed timeline hadn't caught him entirely cold. Holloway had alerted him the moment Maya got behind the rifle. Reeves typed back. Does this change the interception? Ward number. He opened the channel, which means we have the pathway. Earlier than planned, but cleaner. He's showing us the route. And the buyer ward, not yet on the channel. Lem will bring the buyer in after shot confirmation. That's the protocol. He doesn't expose the buyer to process, only to outcome. So the 3 minutes still mattered. The buyer came in after confirmation, which meant the shot had to happen. The confirmation had to go through Holloway's device to Lem, and then Lem would connect the buyer. Ward needed all 3 nodes active simultaneously to close the network. 506. Patel's voice came through Brooks' relay. Target confirmed at 3100 position. Steel plate. 8-inch. Wind at target position. Slight left to right drift. Estimated 4 to 6 miles per hour. A pause. Consistent with yesterday. Reeves looked at Maya. She had heard it. She made no acknowledgement. Her body had already incorporated whatever the wind data told her, and whatever adjustment was required had been made before Patel finished the sentence. 507. Reeves looked at Holloway. Holloway was watching Maya with the specific attention of a man who believed he was documenting something that would be transmitted and analyzed and built upon. The focused observation of the last 3 weeks compressed into this moment. He was not looking at Reeves. He was not looking at the phone in Reeves's hand or the radio on Reeves's belt. He was watching the shooter. Reeves thought he genuinely believes he's about to witness the real thing. He is about to witness the real thing, just not the thing he thinks. 508. Maya's breathing changed. Reeves had learned to read it over 3 days. A slight slowing. The deliberate half-exhale that she used not to calm herself. She didn't need calming, but to synchronize her physical state with the calculation she was running. To bring the body in line with the mathematics. The range was completely silent. Reeves pressed his left hand flat against his thigh. Kept the phone in his right. Kept his face completely neutral. She fired. The pressure wave hit. Chest first, then ears. The specific full-body impact of a .50 caliber report in an enclosed space that is still enormous enough that the sound has room to be itself before it becomes an echo. Reeves watched the ridgeline. 1 second. 2. He was counting. Not for the impact for Ward's signal. For the 3-minute window to start. For Lem's reaction on the north ridge. For Holloway's secondary device to transmit the confirmation. 3 seconds. 4. 4.2. Patel's voice. Flat, professional. Exactly what Holloway needed to hear. Impact confirmed. Target position. 8-inch plate. A half-second pause. Hit. Holloway's shoulders moved. One small motion. The specific physical release of a man receiving the confirmation he came here for. His hand moved to the secondary device. 509. The 3-minute window had started. Ward's message arrived in 11 seconds. Holloway's channel is live. Transmitting to Lem. Lem is processing. 15 seconds later, Lem is satisfied. He's preparing buyer contact. Reeves looked at his phone. Lem's number. Waiting. The message came at 0510. Confirmed General. Professional and clean. I appreciate your cooperation. We're done here. Reeves took one breath. Typed appreciated on this end as well. Safe travel. He sent it. Stood with the phone in his hand and the taste of those words in his mouth, and the specific discipline of a man who had spent 34 years doing hard things and knew that the hardest things were sometimes the ones that required you to say nothing true for 3 minutes. 511. Ward Buyer is on the channel. 3 nodes active. Recording. 512. Patel's voice quieter now on the radio. Sir, the hit it was 4 inches left of center. She had seen it through the spotting scope. She was one of 2 people on the range who understood what 4 inches left of center at 300 meters meant when Maya Carter pulled the trigger. I know, Specialist, Reeves said. A pause. Then Patel very quietly. She did that on purpose. Yes. Another pause. The sound of Patel absorbing something that she would spend a long time thinking about afterward. Right, she said. And went quiet. 513. Ward Buyer contact duration confirmed. Pathway complete. Ready to close on your mark. 1 minute remaining. Reeves looked at Holloway, who was documenting transmitting doing the work he had been positioned to do. 6 years of running this range, and this was the morning he had been building toward, and he believed it was working exactly as planned. Reeves thought the most successful deceptions are the ones where the deceived person does all the work themselves. 514. His phone moved. Lem again. One more thing, General. The sergeant. She's exceptional. Tell her that from me. Professional to professional. Reeves stared at the message. Something moved through him. Not anger, not quite. Something older. The recognition of what it meant that this man, who had spent 18 months building a case to exploit Maya's capability, who had positioned Holloway in this facility, who had manufactured a coercive situation to force a demonstration, still believed in the moment of his apparent success that he was in a position to offer professional recognition. He did not respond to the message. He looked at his watch. 0514 and 50 seconds. He turned to Brooks. Tell Ward, now. Brooks spoke into the radio. 3 seconds later, Ward's confirmation came through moving, and everything happened at once. Tanner came through the east corridor door with 2 additional people behind him. He crossed to Holloway in 4 strides. Holloway looked up from his secondary device with the specific expression of a man whose reality is rearranging itself faster than his comprehension can follow. He started to say something. Reeves heard the beginning of a word, a denial forming. And then, Tanner's hand was on his arm, and the secondary device was on the table, and Holloway was no longer a range master, and had not been one truly for some time. Solis on the exterior perimeter had turned north. She had a radio call going. Reeves couldn't hear the words, but he could read the pace of it, controlled fast, the communication of a trained operator reporting active contact. His phone moved. Ward Lem is moving toward extraction route. North Ridge, east slope descent. 2 of mine are 30 seconds behind him. Reeves typed, don't lose him. Ward won't. Then 40 seconds later, buyer channel is still open. He hasn't closed it. He doesn't know we have it. Because Lem still thought the operation was clean. He had received confirmation. He had sent the courtesy message to Reeves. He was extracting along a pre-planned route with no knowledge that the transmission he'd just sent to his buyer had been captured at both ends, and the buyer on the other end of an open channel was still receiving. Ward Buyer is asking for documentation confirmation. Lem is responding, still transmitting. Every second that buyer channel stayed open was another second of network data. Financial pathway, communication architecture, the threads that connected this morning to the first acquisition 18 months ago and to everything in between. 517. Reeves looked at Maya. She had stood up from the firing position. The Barrett was on the bipod exactly where she'd left it, and she was standing with her hands at her sides, and she was looking at Reeves with an expression that was not satisfaction, not the visible pleasure of an outcome achieved, but something quieter. The specific stillness of a person who has set down something very heavy and is standing in the space where it used to be. He crossed to her. They stood facing each other in the middle of the range. "Holloway's in custody," he said. She nodded. "Ward has Lem's extraction route. His people are behind him." She nodded again. "The buyer channel is still open. Ward is capturing." "How long has it been open?" 8 minutes. Something moved in her expression. "That's enough," she said quietly. 8 minutes on an open buyer channel with active transmission documentation, that's the entire network. She paused. "That's what the 3 acquisitions didn't give us." He looked at her. "Is it over?" She considered the question. Not quickly, she gave it the same careful processing she gave everything. "This thread is over," she said. "The network is going to take time to fully close. There will be a legal process, an intelligence process. It won't be fast." She paused. "But the capability is intact. The system is intact. And the people who built this network spent 18 months trying to replicate something that doesn't replicate." She paused. "They bought a performance. They're going to try to use it, and they're going to fail. And that failure is going to tell them something that 11 months of targeting couldn't tell them. Some things can't be documented. Some things only exist inside the person who does them." He looked at her for a long moment. "The 4 inches. Yes, sir. That was the message." She met his eyes. That was the message. He understood. The 4-inch offset was not just a deception. It was a proof embedded in the deception, a thing that only she would know was there, that proved without documentation, without transmission, without a single data record that anyone could capture, that what she had done was a choice. That the 4-inch offset was as intentional and as controlled as a center hit. That the capability the network had spent 18 months trying to acquire was not a technique that could be stolen, because the technique was inseparable from the person. You could document the output. You couldn't document the judgment. 521. Ward Lem is detained. North Ridge East Slope. Clean. A pause. Buyer channel closed 2 minutes ago. Full capture confirmed. 41 minutes of active transmission. Reeves read it aloud. Maya listened. When he finished, she said, "Good." Just that. Good. He looked at her and he thought about everything that word carried. 11 months of patient construction. The first 3 acquisitions that moved too slowly. The decision to come to Black Ridge to set the conditions to let Holloway operate, to pull Reeves into the frame and assess him and decide he was the right authority for the right moment. The night in the weapons bay with the notebook. The atmospheric calibration at 0330. The shot at 0508 that hit exactly where she intended it to hit 4 inches from where everyone else believed it hit. Good. "Go get some rest," he said. "I will." She picked up the Barrett from the bipod, began the breakdown. "Sir." "What?" "Patel." She didn't look up from the disassembly. "She's going to keep asking questions." "I know." "She's worth answering," Maya said. "She reads process, not just outcome. That's rare." A pause. "She's worth developing." He looked at her. "Is that a recommendation?" "It's an observation," she said. "What you do with it is your business, sir." He almost smiled. "Noted, Sergeant." The debrief took 3 days. Ward ran the primary intelligence extraction, which meant Reeves saw only the pieces that crossed the threshold of what a 4-star general needed to know, and no more. The buyer network was larger than anyone at Black Ridge had anticipated, not a single private contractor or defense-adjacent corporation, but a consortium of interests spread across 4 countries, connected by financial architecture that had been deliberately designed to look like routine international business activity. The kind of network that survived individual node captures because no single person knew enough to expose the whole, except that Lem's buyer channel had been open for 41 minutes transmitting into Ward's interception framework. Ward told Reeves on the third day that the intelligence yield from those 41 minutes was larger than anything produced by the previous 18 months of tracking. "She knew it would be," Reeves said. Ward looked at him. "Yes, sir. She knew." Holloway's situation took longer. His cooperation, which came quickly in the specific way that cooperation comes, when someone realizes the architecture they believed was protecting them has already collapsed, produced additional information that filled in gaps the buyer channel had left open. His motivation was financial. Not ideological, not coerced. Financial. A debt that had grown to a number he couldn't see around, and a contact who had found him through a process so methodical and patient that Holloway had never understood he was being recruited until the relationship was already in place. Reeves thought about Maya's observation. Consistent patterns are information. He thought about the angle Holloway had used to watch her during qualification sessions. Not the angle of a range master, but the angle of someone learning something they hadn't been taught. She had identified the recruitment from the posture before she had a single piece of documentary evidence. She had read it in the way a man stood. DeSalvo was cleared. His brother's company had no confirmed connection to Lem's network. The overlap was coincidental, which was a thing that happened in a world where private defense consulting was a large and interconnected industry. DeSalvo was told nothing about what had happened on the range that morning, beyond what the official cover story provided, which was a routine security review. He accepted this with the professional equanimity of a man who understood that military facilities ran security reviews, and that not all of them required explanation. Patel was told slightly more. Not the operational specifics, not the network details, but enough to understand what the morning had actually been. She received this information from Reeves directly in his office on the afternoon of the second day. She sat across from him and listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She flagged me, didn't she? To you." "She made an observation," Reeves said. Patel nodded slowly, processed that. "What kind of observation?" "That you read process, not just outcome," he said. "That it's rare." Patel looked at the wall for a moment, then she looked back at him. "Is she going to be okay after all of this?" He looked at the specialist sitting across from him, 22 years old, asking about the welfare of a 27-year-old who had just closed an 11-month operation that most career intelligence officers would have considered beyond their capacity, and asking it with the simple directness of someone who had decided that rank was not a reason to avoid the obvious question. "She's going to be fine," he said. "Do you know that, sir, or are you saying it?" He looked at her for a moment. "I know it," he said, "because I've watched her work. And people who understand their work the way she understands hers, they know how to come back from the expenditure of it." He paused. "She's not fragile. She's precise. There's a difference." Patel thought about that. "Yes, sir," she said. And there was something in the way she said it that told him she was filing the distinction somewhere she would use it. He began the formal process of advancing Patel's development track that afternoon. Maya came to his office on the fourth day. He had not requested her. She knocked, entered when he said, "Come in," and sat down without being invited, which was the first time she had done that in his presence. He noticed it and said nothing about it. "Ward tells me the network closure is going to take 6 to 8 weeks, she said. "Conservatively," he said. "He says there may be more nodes than the 41 minutes exposed." "There are 3 more, she said. "In the buyer chain, not in the transmission data in the financial architecture. The pattern is there if you know what you're looking for." She paused. "I've already sent Ward a note." He looked at her. "Of course you have." She almost smiled. He leaned back in his chair. "What happens now? For you?" "The weapons evaluation continues," she said. "There are still system components that need real environment testing. 3 more weeks, probably 4. She paused. After that, I go back to wherever Ward needs me. And the oversight structure. The oversight structure continues, she said. It always continues. She paused. That's why it works. He nodded slowly. He had been thinking over the past 4 days about the architecture she'd described. The invisible framework around her capability. The deliberate decision to remain a sergeant. The classified file. The badge designed to tell you enough to stop without telling you enough to understand. He had spent 34 years inside military institutions, and he understood perhaps for the first time that the most important protective structures were sometimes the ones that the institution itself didn't control. The clearance request I submitted, he said. The first one. If it had been approved, then you would have read the operational details of the 3 200-meter shot, she said. And you would have understood the capability more specifically. And you would have had a documented understanding of a classified operation that adds one more person who has to be protected. She paused. The oversight structure declined it for your benefit as much as mine. He sat with that. I didn't think of it that way. Most people don't, she said. Classification feels like exclusion from the outside. From the inside, it's sometimes protection. She paused. Not always, but sometimes. He looked at her for a moment. The apology I owe you. She looked at him directly. Sir, the first morning, grabbing the rifle, making an assessment before I had a single fact. He held her gaze. I want to say it directly, not as a general acknowledging a soldier, as one person acknowledging another. She was quiet. I looked at you, he said, and I saw a category. Young, female. Alone behind a weapon that I believed she had no standing to hold. I acted on the category before I saw the person. He paused. I've done that before, not always with weapons, not always in ways that were visible, but the mechanism is the same, and I've done it, and I did it to you, and I'm sorry. The room was very quiet. Maya looked at him for a long moment. The assessment quality of her gaze, that precise, unhurried read, was present, but there was something else in it now, something that was not quite the ghost of a smile and not quite the absence of one. You put it down, she said finally. What? The rifle, she said. After you saw the badge, you put it down and you gave it back. She paused. Most people, when they've made a decision and then encountered evidence that the decision was wrong, they don't put it down. They find a way to keep holding it. She paused. You put it down. That's not nothing. He looked at her for a long time. I pushed on the file, he said. I submitted the clearance request. Yes. And when it came back declined, I called Ward. Yes. And when Ward told me what he could tell me, I believed him, and I asked you to demonstrate. He paused. And then I came to the weapons bay when you asked me to come. I closed the door when you told me to close it. I sat down when you told me to sit. He paused again. I authorized the overnight reassignment based on information from a sergeant whose file I still can't read, against an adversary whose name I had from one anonymous communication. He paused. And I sent a courtesy message to a private intelligence contractor while my people were moving to detain him. He stopped. That is either the least defensible sequence of decisions I've made in 34 years, or the most defensible. Which do you think it is? She said. He held her gaze. Both, he said. Depending on who's asking. She looked at him. Something moved in her face. Something real and unguarded, in a way that her face rarely was, a genuine warmth that was not performed and not calculated, that she had not planned to show, and that arrived because it could not be prevented. Then you understand, she said, why the oversight structure does what it does. He nodded slowly. It trusts people based on what they do under pressure, not what their file says, not what their rank implies. He paused. It watches how someone responds when they grab the rifle, and then has to decide whether to hold it. Yes, she said. Exactly. He was quiet for a moment. Is that what you were doing the first morning? Testing whether I'd put it down. I was seeing what you were, she said. I try not to know ahead of time. It affects the read. A pause. But yes, The rifle was partly the test. The badge was partly the test. Every interaction after that was partly the test. She paused. You passed consistently. That's why you're in this office knowing what you know. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at her. You do this often. With people. I assess everyone I work with, she said. I have to. The work requires it. And most people? She was quiet for a moment, long enough that the pause was its own answer. Most people, she said carefully, are not bad people. They're just fixed. In the category they've made their decision inside, and the evidence has to be very large and very undeniable before they can move. She paused. You moved on evidence that most generals would have filed and forgotten. I was helped, he said, by the fact that you were very good at what you were doing. We helped each other, she said. And she said it simply without performance, as a factual statement about what had happened between two people over 4 days in a military facility on a mountain. That's what good work looks like when it works. He sat with that for a moment. Then he said, when you leave here, after the evaluation is done, you're going to go somewhere else, and you're going to be a sergeant, and you're going to show up at 05:30 and do the work, and nobody around you is going to know. Yes. And the record will stay classified. Yes. And the badge will keep doing what it does. Yes. He looked at her. And you're okay with that? She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I'm not looking for anyone to know, she said. I never was. She paused. But I will tell you something that I haven't told many people, sir. She paused again. This week, what we did here together, it mattered. Not because the network is going to close and the capability is intact, and Ward has 41 minutes of buyer data. She paused. It mattered because I've spent 4 years doing this work largely alone inside an oversight structure that is excellent and necessary, and that is not by design people I know. And for 4 days there were people I knew. Brooks writing everything down and not asking unnecessary questions. Patel on the radio calling a hit understanding what she was hearing. She paused. You closing the door when I asked you to close it. He held her gaze. That's not nothing either, she said. The words landed in the quiet of the office and sat there, and he let them sit. He thought about Brooks the next morning after the operation, who had come into the office and sat down and said without preamble, I was terrified the whole time. And then, but I'm glad I was there. And then had gone back to his work. He thought about Patel asking, is she going to be okay? With the directness of someone who had decided rank was not a reason to avoid the obvious question. He thought about Ward in the doorway on the second day saying, she was right about the 3 additional nodes, by the way. I found them this morning. And the tone of his voice when he said it, not surprise, not quite, but the acknowledgement of a man who had worked with Maya Carter long enough to stop being surprised, and had not yet found the emotion that replaced surprise. He thought about a 20-year-old in a position she wasn't supposed to occupy, 3 soldiers in a corridor that was closing a decision made in the specific cold of real consequences. He thought about 4 inches left of center at 300 meters, chosen with the same precision as a center hit, carrying a message that only the person who fired it would ever fully understand. He thought about what she had said in the weapons bay. I calculate what's at stake, and I calculate what I can do. And if those 2 things align, I act. He stood up, extended his hand. She looked at it for 1 second, then stood and took it. They shook hands. A general and a sergeant in a small office in a mountain facility in the quiet of an early morning that had been through a great deal and had come out the other side intact. Sergeant Carter, he said. General Reeves, she said. He held her hand for 1 moment longer than the protocol required. Thank you, he said, for pulling me in. She looked at him with those clear, steady eyes. Thank you, she said, for not letting go of the rifle, because someone told you to. A pause. For following the evidence instead. She left. He sat back down, looked at the window, The mountains beyond it, enormous and cold and entirely indifferent to everything that had happened in the facility at their base. The North Ridge where Lem had watched through optics and believed he was seeing confirmation of a capability he could acquire and deploy and sell, not understanding that what he was observing was a performance calibrated to deceive him by the most precise instrument in the theater of operations. The same ridge where the ridgeline trees moved in the morning thermal current, and Maya Carter had stood reading them at 06:15 on her first morning reading the current, reading the system as a system. Reeves thought about all the things he had not understood when he walked into the weapons bay 4 mornings ago. He thought about how many of them he understood now. He thought about how many he still didn't. He thought that the second category was probably larger than the first, and that this was not a failure of the 4 days, but a feature of them. That the most important thing he had learned was not what was in the classified file, or what the badge meant, or how you placed a round 4 inches left of center at 300 meters with deliberate intent. The most important thing he had learned was that some people carried their capability the way they carried everything quietly, completely, without needing the world to measure it for them. That the strongest ones were often the ones who had already settled long ago the question of what they were. Not because they were never afraid or never uncertain, but because the settling was deeper than fear and deeper than uncertainty. Because they had found through work and time and the specific cold of real decisions with real consequences, a place inside themselves where the question was answered and the answer was enough. He picked up his phone, opened a message, typed to his office in Washington. Secondary clearance consideration. Subject: Patel R. Specialist. Black Ridge. For evaluation track. He sent it, looked at the mountains. Then he opened a second message. No addressee yet. Just the words typed slowly the way you type something you've been thinking about for 4 days and have finally found the right form for. The most dangerous soldier I have ever encountered did not announce herself. She did not demand recognition. She did not need the confirmation of the room or the rank structure or the clearance level of the people around her to know what she was capable of. She simply came to work. And when the work required everything, she gave it precisely, completely, without remainder. And when it was done, she went back to the equipment bench and started the breakdown. I have spent 34 years in the military. I have known soldiers of extraordinary capability and extraordinary character. I have seen courage in forms that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I have never seen anything like Maya Carter. And the reason I am only now writing this 4 days after I grabbed a rifle out of her hands is that it has taken me 4 days to find words that are adequate to the fact of her. I am not sure these are adequate either, but they are the truest I have. He saved the document, did not send it to anyone, filed it in a location that was accessible only to himself. Some things deserve to be written down, not because someone else would read them, but because the act of writing them was itself a form of acknowledgement. A record that a man had seen something and understood it, and been changed by it, kept in the place where things that changed you were kept. He set down the phone. Outside the mountain, morning was fully arrived. The cold had shifted from the pressing cold of the pre-dawn into the cleaner cold of early light. Somewhere in the facility, Maya Carter was at the equipment bench, or in the gym reading the ventilation current, or standing at a window calculating tomorrow's atmospheric differential, while the rest of the facility moved through its morning routine around her, unaware of what had happened and what she had built, and what she had given up to protect it. Jonathan Reeves looked at the mountains for a long time. Then he got up, straightened his jacket, and went to work. Because the mission never stopped. And the best thing you could do after being shown what excellence looked like was to carry it forward in the decisions you made in the people you trusted, in the willingness to put down the rifle when the evidence told you to, and to follow through the door that someone had already decided to open. That was the lesson. It was the only one that mattered. And he had learned it from a sergeant with a small black badge and a confirmed record at 3,200 meters, who had never once asked the world to know her name, and who had changed everything anyway.